Hello, it is 2nd of December 2016, and this is episode 9 of Scavenger's Hoard, a Star Wars podcast. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Kirsty.
We're here to deliver a regular rundown of Star Wars news, analysis, and commentary, with a focus on the sequel trilogy and the future of the saga. So, Kirsty, how's your week in Star Wars been?
It's been good because after all that complaining on last week's episode about not knowing when the Rogue One tickets were going to come out in America, I finally got mine.
Yay! That's so
Yay!
cool.
Yeah, I'm really happy.
You must be really excited.
I am. I know we're going to get to this a bit later in the news segment, I think, but there were some problems with getting tickets online and stuff like that. It's been quite surprising, and I'm sure Disney are thrilled about it. We got them in the end.
Yeah, I'm sure this struggle made it more worthwhile.
Yeah, it's a bit dramatic and exciting. It's like, oh, will I get them? Will I not?
I had a bit of an experience like that, but yeah, let's say we'll talk about that for later when we get the segment on the tickets.
Yeah. How about yours?
Oh yeah, my week, it was the most exciting thing that happened was that I saw Force Awakens again for like the millionth time. So I had a friend over, and often my suggestion when I have a friend over is like, hey, do you want to watch Star Wars? And they're generally some level of enthusiasm less than mine, because I have a lot of enthusiasm for Star Wars. And yeah, we watched it and it was awesome. And it was super awesome because we just watched Warcraft, which it was awful. So bad. Oh my goodness. And I felt terrible for hating it so much because I really like the director. The director is Duncan Jones, and I think he's really talented, and I like his other films. But Warcraft was just abysmal. I'd give it like 1 star, and I'm normally pretty generous with my ratings, but it was just incoherent, and yeah, it made no sense. So watching The Force Awakens after that and seeing how much like warmth and humanity and personality that film had compared to something that just felt soulless as Warcraft did, it was just lovely. It was a really great viewing experience.
Awesome. Because we're coming up to like a year of having that film.
Yeah.
And do you feel like you like it more than you ever did? Or there are certain things you're pointing out and thinking, that's not quite as impressive as I first thought, or anything like that?
I think I still like it just as much as I did when it was on its theatrical run, if not more. Because I know that I liked it way more by viewing 8 of the theatrical run than I did of viewing 1 of the theatrical run. It was a film it took me a while to like adjust to and properly appreciate. But yeah, when I appreciated it, I truly appreciated it. And yeah, now I really love it. It's like one of my go-to comfort films.
Yeah,
same. If I just want to go like, oh, I want to chill and relax, I'll put on Force Awakens.
Yeah, it has its dark moments for sure, but it's ultimately a very heartwarming movie.
Yeah.
You feel good. You feel good watching it.
Yeah, it's great to watch with friends. It's really nice. Right, before we move on to news, there are just 2 orders of business I would like to do. First of all, I would like to say a big thank you to everyone who has rated and reviewed us on iTunes. You're amazing, so that really helps. And then the next thing is that we have an email now. So if you have questions for the podcast, which we answer at the end, then please email them to scavengershoard@gmail.com. And then you'll have a good chance of getting your question featured on the podcast. So with that said, we are going to move on to news. And the first story is the suggestion that Obi-Wan Kenobi may have a role to play in the sequel trilogy going forward. And this is the story. Speaking on Rebel Force Radio, Anthony Breznican commented on the possibility of Obi-Wan Kenobi having a role to play in the sequel trilogy going forward. I've heard rumours that the one reason they haven't moved sooner on Obi-Wan is that they're not done with Obi-Wan quite yet in the saga films. So I wouldn't be surprised to see an Obi-Wan solo film happen between episode 8 and episode 9. I think that there'll probably be some reference to Obi-Wan in the saga films and his connection to whatever characters he happens to have a connection with. I've already written that I think that Rey has some kind of connection to him, family connection. So if that's the case, maybe we see part of that play out in the future Obi-Wan movie. Ewan McGregor would be the perfect age to reprise that character. So, what did you think when you saw this story, Kirsty?
I thought it was very interesting. I'm not wedded to any particular Rey parentage theory. I don't think that she's related to the main hero. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah.
But I didn't have anything going in. It wasn't something that really mattered to me before watching the movie. And I know that, Obi-Wan as her grandfather or whatever has been a theory since the beginning.
Yes.
But it does seem like the Skywalker and Solo theories have been the most popular.
Mm.
So I'm just happy to see another one being floated
Yeah.
that's being taken a bit more seriously now because this guy, as we've talked about before, he's pretty in there with Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, it makes me wonder if he really knew something, would he spoil it?
Mm.
But the other, it's just good to have this kind of discussion. It's a lot more interesting.
Yeah, no, definitely. For anyone who's listening who doesn't know who Anthony Breznican is, he's basically the Entertainment Weekly journalist who gets all the exclusives on Star Wars. So if Lucasfilm have a story to break about the sequel trilogy or the Star Wars story films, this is the guy they tend to go to. So he clearly has a very, very good relationship with Lucasfilm. I think he also does hosting at Star Wars Celebration. Like that is how closely tied he is to Star Wars, like as a company, as an institution. So he should, technically speaking, be right in their pockets. And if this rumor is completely groundless and bears no relation to what's actually going to happen in the films, it would be very strange for him to be making these comments because otherwise he's jeopardizing his own credibility and he's also posing the risk of annoying Lucasfilm and like jeopardizing this amazing access he has to all those stories. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it doesn't mean necessarily that Obi-Wan is going to turn out to be related to Rey,
Mm,
but I think it probably does have some credibility behind it, this idea that they do want to do an Obi-Wan film because everyone has been clamoring for it. Well, most
yeah.
people, like everyone loves Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan. I do anyway.
I like
So
him too.
I would love to see that at some point, but it makes complete sense that if there's something going on with him at some point in the trilogy, they're going to want to save it until afterwards.
Mm. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I must say that the Kenobi theory is one like I'm not like uber into Rey's parentage, but I had considered the various possibilities, and Rey Kenobi is one I hadn't really given that much credence to, just because I didn't see that much for it, if that makes sense. So there are obviously things like Obi-Wan saying these are your first steps in Maz's castle, so it's not like there's no connection at all between these characters. But I thought that could mean anything. But hearing
Right.
this stuff, it is making me take it more seriously, I must say, because I like to think I'm the kind of person where even if I initially don't give a theory much like of a chance, because I don't see any reason to believe it, if I get new information in, then I can like go back to it and reassess and say, okay, maybe there is something in this.
Oh yeah, if they have a compelling way to give Obi-Wan a story after he's been on Tatooine and he falls in love with someone and has a family or whatever, great. I'm totally open to that, but
Mm.
it's not something I currently understand as part of the character.
Yeah,
But I'm open to it if it works, if it's a good story. So
yeah, no, definitely. It's all going to be about the story that they tell with it. And right now, like you say, that's a complete unknown, because we have no concept of Obi-Wan as a family man at all. Obviously, in Clone Wars, he had a relationship with Satine, but obviously that ended quite tragically,
yeah.
shall we say. So it's like, was there another relationship, like on Tatooine? Did he go on to have a family there? It's all kinds of mysteries. And
hmm
yeah, it's very intriguing, but we will see in due course. Is there anything else you'd like to say about Obi-Wan?
Uh, no, I don't think so. Just that I really do hope they do eventually have a spin-off because Ewan McGregor's like he's a fantastic actor
Yeah.
and he's just at the right age for them to do something like this.
Yeah, no, it'd be so
So
perfect. It's like every time I see him on the Graham Norton show, because Ewan McGregor always seems to be interviewed on the Graham Norton show. They bring up the Obi-Wan movie, and yeah, you can tell he's up for it. You know, he's totally game. Like he's quite a good sport when it comes to these things. So yeah, take advantage of that. Like when you're done with Obi-Wan, like as he's going to be used in the films, just go wild, go for it.
yeah, I wonder if this means that we could actually see Ewan in the trilogy, like
Mm,
as a Force ghost or something like that.
that'd be quite radical.
Yeah.
Like, si I remember there was a big outcry about Hayden appearing as Anakin's Force Ghost at the end of, I think it's the Blu-ray of Return of the Jedi. So they obviously
Yeah.
replaced Sebastian Shaw,
hmm
and I know that caused lots of upset. So I do wonder if that would be quite a controversial move, because obviously we've only seen older Obi-Wan in the guise of Alec Guinness, and would it be like, well, Obi-Wan just feels like appearing younger today. Deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you have to take some kind of artistic license. The the changing of Anakin was a problem for me because they just completely inserted him into that film where he didn't really belong. But if it's
Yes.
for a new film, it's
Yeah.
like, Star Wars fans are often resistant to change.
Mm,
So the special editions, it's like, oh no, no, this isn't what we remember. This isn't how it's supposed to be. But if it's
yeah.
a new film, I think it's different.
Yeah. No, I get that. I think there's more of a allowance for it in the films going forward because it's not like this holy grail that people remember from their childhoods, and it's like you cannot touch a single frame of this perfect immaculate film or I'm going to cry. That won't happen. So
Yeah.
yeah, we have space. Right, to move on, the next story is very exciting. So it's that John Williams has started to record the episode 8 score in December. Or I should say he's going to start recording it. That's the impression I got from the tense usage. Anyway, it was an offhand comment in Variety, and it said he begins recording Star Wars Episode 8 in December and expects to record off and on through March or April 2017. So, what did you think when you heard this news, Kirsty?
I'm really excited.
Same, same.
Oh, I love it. I love his music so much. I'm really
Mm,
glad that he's doing episode 8. I hope
yes,
that he can still do episode 9, but that might be jumping the gun a little bit.
yeah,
Yeah, and hearing that he'll be doing it through March or April, it's like, okay, so we're probably going to get something really good from Celebration then.
yeah. No, you are so lucky because Kirsty's going to Celebration. Like, I'm like a lemon. I'm stuck here on this pathetic little island.
Oh.
No, it's fine. I don't mean to sound so bitter, but it's going to be so awesome. I'm going to be like your spirit animal. I'm going to be there in spirit.
Yeah, I wish you could come.
Yeah, I wish I could too, but plane tickets.
I mean, I'm still praying somehow that we'll get something before Celebration, but I don't know. I mean, they're still going to be kind of marketing Rogue One with the DVD release and everything, so they might save everything until April.
I think there might be something on the Rogue One DVD. I think
Yeah.
that'd be a smart move for them. But we will see because it's not like there was anything to do with Rogue One on the Force Awakens DVD. So
Yeah.
that might be a tad optimistic. But yeah, like this to me, it was just amazing because it really struck me how far advanced they are in the process of making this film. Because someone put together like a list of the time-ins for recording the music for the other films, and it was insane because there's maybe like 100 days before the theatrical release that they were recording the score. But in this case, it's over a year that they're going to start
Yeah.
working on the score.
Well,
And that's bonkers.
we heard a while back that he was already watching rough cuts of the film,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So, yeah, I'm hoping that it means it's going to be excellent if he's having all of this time. And it's
Yeah.
such a contrast to Giacchino with Rogue One.
Yeah, that's just ridiculous. I think Giacchino has 6 weeks
Yeah.
and John Williams has over a year. Like probably like 18 months. It's like you said, we heard that he was watching a rough cut a long time ago.
Well,
So
I guess we were saying last week, like the original release date of this film was in May. So if everything's being kept to schedule, and I think wasn't Ryan done filming actually earlier than they expected?
I think it was a bit early. I think
Not an awful lot, but
yeah, I think they wrapped in either July or August.
yeah.
So yeah, they were making very good time. Like I hate to sound too cynical, but obviously John Williams, he is older now. I think he's like 83, 84. So I can't help but think that in some ways this is going to be a practical decision because when you are that age, you can't plan ahead too far.
Yeah.
So I know it's really sad. I don't like to think about it either, but I do think it's a really good and sound move because, like I say, it gives him plenty of time to come up with a really great score. And yeah, it's also just a question of like getting it done, like so everyone can like take a breather and say, "Phew, beautiful John Williams score."
Yeah.
Because like it's gonna be so. I can't imagine Star Wars like the main saga films without John Williams music at this point because even the Force Awakens score that took a while to grow on me, but when it grew on me, I really loved it. Like Rey's theme, the Jedi Steps, like all those themes are beautiful and they're iconic, and I think they're just as good as anything from the original trilogy. To be honest, in terms of musicianship.
Oh yeah, me too. I really enjoyed that soundtrack.
Yeah, so like I've heard it get a lot of flack, so like, I've heard people say it was lackluster and disappointing, but I think that's just because a lot of it was new. And people have these old themes from Star Wars embedded in their head to such an extent that almost anything that is new is going to seem lackluster by comparison.
Yeah, it's probably hard for him to compete with something like the Imperial March because that goes beyond the music itself. It's
Hmm.
so coded in society as
Yeah.
like something associated with sinister evil, you know.
Yeah. Even
Um,
people who really don't know Star Wars well, they know that music.
exactly.
Like and yeah, it's just incredible how like iconic those themes have become. So yeah, like you, I'm just really, really happy that John Williams is working on scoring this thing and that we're going to get another kick-ass John Williams score. It's going to be great.
Yay.
Yay. Also, I just realized, sorry for being, sorry for going so depressing towards the.
Oh no, it makes sense, right, for them to do that
Yeah.
now. You don't want to think about it, but
Hmm.
they probably have to, you
Yeah.
know?
No, exactly. I think it's just a practical consideration. I hope he lives to be like 130 and like the oldest man ever and still making amazing music.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's just a legend. Right. With that said, we will move on to the Rogue One news segment, which is going to be quite substantial because, for obvious reasons, there's lots of Rogue One news. So the first story is that Rogue One has broken pre-sale records, and the story is from Variety, and it goes, Rogue One, a Star Wars story, is already a hot ticket. The space opera spin-off recorded the second highest first day of pre-sales in domestic box office history. IMAX Entertainment CEO Greg Foster said at an investor conference on Tuesday. The record holder for first day pre-sales is Star Wars The Force Awakens, which debuted last year to nearly $248 million. Rogue One is on track to open to north of $130 million when it debuts on December 16th. Foster didn't give specifics about how many tickets had been sold. So now is your time to shine, Kirsty. Tell me about your experience of Rogue One ticketing, North America
Well,
style.
yeah, last week I mentioned that I really want to go and see it at Cinerama, which is a big cinema downtown in Seattle.
Hmm.
And I did get tickets to see it there, but not for my first viewing. It was
Ah,
they hadn't updated their website in time. It kind of and people were queuing in person down there, so it makes sense for them to get first dibs.
yes.
So I'm gonna go to a regular cinema near my house for the first one, but
Hmm.
I have got tickets to go and see that when my sisters come visit on the 23rd.
Oh, that's really
Um,
nice.
yeah, so that would be a nice thing for Christmas. But I'm already planning my repeat viewings. So hopefully it's a good movie.
Yeah, no, for me, I've done it really backwards. I have tickets booked for what I hope will be my second viewing, but not for my first viewing. Because obviously, for podcast and just being in Star Wars fandom reasons, I need to see this movie the day it comes out.
Yeah.
Because if I don't, I'm totally left behind. So I need to see it the earliest opportunity. But I am going to see it in London at the Science Museum, but that's only at the weekend. And obviously, it comes out on a Wednesday or Thursday. I can't remember which.
It's
And
a
obviously,
Thursday, I think.
okay, yeah, so it comes out on Thursday, and I need to see it on Thursday for reasons. And yes, and I still need to book those tickets. So I have the Science Museum tickets, but not the Thursday tickets. But
Mm.
that should be fine because I looked and I'm in like a provincial town and it seems like the tickets are hardly selling.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they are. It's not the most popular cinema in the world, and it's definitely
No.
not the greatest cinema in the world, but it is a cinema where I can see Rogue One. And I also just bought a unlimited card so I can
Oh,
go and
did
see.
you?
Yeah, I did literally just before I started recording the podcast.
Yeah.
So I can go to the cinema however many times I want and see this baby over and over and over again. This is
Wow.
gonna be like round baby. Round.
Yeah, I saw that they were doing those. I think it's Regal Cinemas in America that
Mhm.
yeah. And that's a pretty good idea. I kind of wish they'd done that for The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
Uh, because you do end up going and see it a lot.
Yeah, you do, don't you? Yeah. No, so I thought now is probably the time to do this and save lots of money. Um, and yeah, I basically plotted out all the films that are coming out in 2017 and I judged how much it would cost if I didn't get the card. And then I compared it and it's like, okay, I'm going to get the card.
Yeah.
So there's
It's a
lots
good
of
decision.
movies. Yeah, I felt like it was sound.
Yeah, but
Um,
the Fandango website did crash here,
yeah.
as people were trying to get them. So I had two computers going trying to get them, and eventually got them in the end. But it was like a bit nail biting, which it's kind of exciting, you know.
I
You feel
bet.
like it's an event.
Yeah, no, totally. I had to go into like one of those automated queues when I got my tickets for the Science Museum, but thankfully there wasn't any problem and I was able to get good seats for the time I wanted. But I bet that would have been different if I'd been trying to get seats for like the first night showing, which I wasn't. So I was
Yeah.
good, but only by happenstance. So that was great.
Yeah, we'll be going to see it on the Thursday as well, the first night. So hopefully we will both have seen it in time to do our Friday podcast.
Yes, no, we should definitely aim for that at all costs. Because that actually works out really neatly, doesn't it? Seeing it on
Yeah.
Thursday, podcast and Friday. Okay.
Hmm.
Awesome. Yeah, and just on a more general note, beyond our personal experiences of ticketing, this is obviously great news. It's not surprising news because we knew Rogue One was on track to do well. So I think we discussed the tracking figures in last week's episode, and they're very high.
Yeah, I wonder if they're going to adjust those now.
Yeah, like I think if the pre-sales are this like strong, you would think that they'd upscale it, but in the Variety article, it did still seem quite conservative. It said around $130 million.
Mm.
So yeah, I guess it's really hard to judge, but I reckon it will do well. I'd almost be willing to bet on it doing over 150 million, but I say almost. I'm not quite willing to put money on that yet. Let's see another week and track how the interest goes.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's doing very well, so that's good. So we like to see Rogue One doing well. It's
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
yay. Um, and that brings us neatly on to our next story, which is that Tony Gilroy has a big Rogue One payday. And this story is from the Hollywood Reporter, and it goes thusly. Rogue One might be about a group of rebels absconding with plans for the Death Star, but they aren't the only ones making out like bandits. I love that. Tony Gilroy, who was brought in to rewrite and help oversee reshoots for the Gareth Edwards directed Star Wars film, out December 16th, will pocket north of $5 million for his efforts, say sources. Gilroy, writer of several Bourne movies and director of Best Picture Oscar nominee Michael Clayton, was first brought in to help write dialogue and scenes for Rogue's reshoots and was being paid $200,000 a week. I'm in the wrong job, according to several sources. That figure is fairly normal for a top-tier writer on a big-budget studio film. But as the workload and the reshoots expanded, so did Gilroy's time and paycheck. Gilroy started on Rogue One in June, and by August he was taking a leading role with Edwards in post-production, which lasted well into the fall. The reshoots are said to have tackled several issues in the film, including the ending. So, Kirsty, what did you make of this?
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, I'm really bad at maths, but I was trying to do like the mental maths to figure out how many weeks that was if he was on 200K a week and he ended
Yeah.
up $5 million.
It sounds like these because people like Pablo Hidalgo on Twitter have been quite salty, really, in terms of people talking about the reshoots and how there was that figure 40% of the film was being reshot, right?
Yeah.
I think Making Star Wars reported on that originally,
Hmm.
and Pablo was like, "Oh, everyone's making this into something more dramatic than it actually is." But this really does sound significant.
It really does. And I do seriously think it's damage control and defensiveness when people like Pablo like resist anyone even talking about the reshoots
Yeah, and you
because
can understand that,
yeah, no, sure. Like, no, understandably, they're going to be very protective of this film. And I'm sure that everyone is working their butts off to make sure this film is the best it possibly could be. Like, and they're therefore very, like, acutely aware of any criticism and any negative feeling.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, the thing is, you can acknowledge that these reshoots happened
mhm.
and still feel good about the movie because presumably it's to make improvements.
Yeah, no,
So, you'll hopefully end up with a better film.
yeah, no, exactly. I think that's kind of why I liked the interview of Michael Giacchino last week, because he was not trying to hide what a mess this film has been behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Like he was just saying he didn't really want to think about that too much because he just wanted to come in and do his job and focus on that. And like I really respected him for that because it's like you're not trying to hide that there's problems in this film, but you're not dwelling on them because that's not the point. That's not why you're here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciated that. And yeah, I can understand all sides, but I prefer like just straight up honesty, like what Michael Giacchino managed, over like just denying outright that there's any problems.
Right, because if the film itself turns out to be excellent, then
Mm,
that is what's going to count decades from now.
yes.
People aren't still going to be talking about the fact that there were reshoots. They're going to be
Mhm.
talking about how great a film it is.
Yeah. No, exactly. So,
So,
I'm not sure if I've mentioned it before on the podcast, but I really, really love Westworld, which is like the TV series that everyone's been talking about lately on HBO in America.
mm.
And it's just so good. But that show, it was a complete nightmare behind the scenes. I think they first filmed the pilot well over a year ago, maybe even more like 2 years ago. It's insane. Like it was constantly delayed and put back, and they had to go back and rewrite it all and reshoot things, and they poured money like nobody's business into this project. But tell you what, this show is incredible, and they've done such a great job on just making it work and making it all seem cohesive and feel incredibly rewarding and intricate. So that's a great example of something that could have been a disaster where they had to go back and like, make lots and lots of changes and revisions, and it really paid off and improved the final product. So I hope it's going to be like that with Rogue One. Obviously, it's very different from film to TV, but I think it does just demonstrate that it's possible to go back and reshoot stuff and inject lots of money into it and have that be worthwhile and actually make a positive difference.
Yeah. I'm not concerned about it. Like
Mm,
it's hopefully we end up with a fantastic film.
yeah.
And in terms of the things we've been hearing about why the reshoots happened and what the story seems to be now,
Hmm.
that seems like something that would appeal to a broader audience as well. That it has this emotional heart and there's humor and love and camaraderie between the characters,
Yeah.
and that you get more of a backstory and emotional pull to the side characters as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. On Rebel Force Radio, the same interview where he mentioned the Obi-Wan thing, Anthony Breznikin, he mentioned that he'd spoken to Riz Ahmed,
Mm.
and that Riz Ahmed had told him that when they first shot Rogue One, so principal photography, his character Bodhi Rook, he wasn't really properly defined. There wasn't like much of a backstory there. So then that's something they tackled with the reshoots. Like they went back and they gave him like more to work with as an actor, and that makes me glad because Riz Ahmed is such a good actor. You should not waste him on
Yeah,
like a paper
exactly.
thin character with no depth. Like that's just criminal. Um, it does reiterate to me that Rogue One really seems to have just gone before cameras way too early. It should not have started filming when it did because they clearly weren't ready. If like they're now coming out and just openly saying my character wasn't well defined, so we had to go back and define him,
Mm.
that's quite a big problem. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's most important to me that they did recognize that and they went back and fixed that. So
Yeah, because
I'll,
I think that's quite a common danger with these big ensemble movies.
mm,
The ones I'm thinking of are things like the Avengers and those big comic book movies where you have so many different characters that you can't really spend an awful lot of time on them. But if you write the scenes well, you can very quickly get these emotional hearts to the characters that you don't need to have an awful lot of exposition on.
yeah,
But it could be just as easily that you would have them as like cutout, cardboard cutout characters that don't really add much. They're just kind of there as filler.
yeah,
So I'm glad
exactly.
that they went back and paid more attention to that.
Yeah, no, definitely. It seems like they're making changes for the right reasons, which is important to me. Right, we'll keep this baby bouncing along. And the next story is that Tarkin is confirmed for Rogue One. And this is yet again a story from our friend Anthony Breznican. He is providing us with lots of Rogue One material right now. Yeah, and the story goes the Imperial commander, played by the late Peter Cushing in 1977's original Star Wars, has long been rumored to make an appearance in Rogue One, which takes place just prior to the events of that first film. Now, at long last, in a teaser to promote the advance ticket sales that began at midnight on Monday, we catch a glimpse from behind of the resurrected villain, watching from afar as his precious Death Star is assembled. John Knoll, the executive producer and visual effects supervisor for Rogue One, hinted at something revolutionary in a recent interview with VW. Asked what holy grail the visual effects designers were chasing with this film, which never before seen bit of technology they innovated, Knoll said, I have to tread lightly there because some of the fun bits of innovation are stuff that I've been asked not to talk about yet. You know, we want to hold that back. Wink, wink. So, Kirsty, what are your feelings about seeing Tarkin again?
I'm really interested to see how it's done
Mm,
because this could be excellent or it could be terrible.
yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a grand tradition of diving deep into the uncanny valley with CGI recreations of dead actors.
Yeah. I mean, we've been hearing rumors about this for a while, and
Mm.
he's in the Catalyst book as well. He's written really well in that.
Oh, no.
Um, so I was thinking, yes, they're probably going to have him in the film, but I'm reserving my judgment to see how well it's done because it could be really bad. I know you brought up before the Audrey Hepburn chocolate advert,
Yes.
which is
Oh,
creepy.
Nightmares, nightmares, and it's even worse because it's so close. Is like that thing was maybe like a millimeter off being photorealistic and completely convincing. But the fact that it's that close, but still not quite close enough, that almost makes it 10 times worse.
Yeah.
Because it's this close to being real, but your eye just knows it's wrong. You cannot trick the eye when it comes to a living person who you've seen like acting on film. It's like seeing an eerily realistic mannequin of that person act, and it's just creepy as hell. And yet I'm especially like precious about this because I really love Peter Cushing. Like not just in Star Wars. I love him as an actor generally. I actually went to a museum in the town where he lived, like until he died, because they have like a really cool collection of like his personal effects
Hmm.
and like this little sketchbook that he filled with these like portraits of people that he was just observing, like when he'd go to have his dinner in the local restaurant. And yeah, he just comes across as like this really like charming, sweet, clever man.
Hmm.
And yeah, like I just love him. Like he's been in the films I've watched since I was a child. He was in lots of the Hammer horror films as well,
Yes.
and I love those. Um, although he was pretty much always the good guy. Like it's funny because he got typecast as like the monster man, because he was associated with this big horror film studio. But that doesn't really reflect the characters he played, and it certainly doesn't reflect the kind of man he was because he was so sensitive and softly spoken and
Hmm.
everything. But yeah, I need to stop like creeping on Peter Cushing.
No,
I,
that's the thing. Like, there are these people out there like you who are huge fans of this character and this actor.
mm,
So it could, I'm hoping that, I'm hoping that it's great, obviously.
yeah.
But something like this, and I'm concerned about the ethics of it in a way as well, like
Mm,
using someone's likeness, and obviously you can't get permission from them.
yeah.
It could, if it went badly, it could be an insult to their memory.
Yeah, I do wonder about the legality of it because he presumably had some kind of estate, someone in charge to manage the estate, and I wonder if like they had to go and ask permission, like to recreate his likeness,
I think
because
they would have to.
yeah, you'd think they'd have to. Like it's not like you become part of the public domain when you die.
No, I mean the Audrey Hepburn example, they did have to pay her family for that, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did because especially because she still had living children.
Yeah.
Peter Cushing, he never had children.
Mm.
So it's obviously a bit of a different situation, but I'm sure there must still be like heirs to his estate in some respect, even if that's like a lawyer's office somewhere.
Right.
So yeah, like I'm excited. So like I said, I really like this character and I love Peter Cushing, but I just hope they do it well and that it's not too cheap. Like I don't want to see Peter Cushing like resurrected for like a bunch of like extended scenes in this thing.
Oh no, it's got to be something that's really blink and you'll miss it, surely. He's just got to be in the background or something. Like it can't be a huge significant role, right?
I reckon if they're talking about it in these terms as like the holy grail of special effects, I reckon there'll be some kind of like big pivotal scene that he appears in. And is he in Clone Wars, Tarkin?
Uh, I actually can't remember.
So I
I'll
was
have to go
just
back and check
thinking,
that.
like, there must be like voice alikes, actors who can imitate Peter Cushing's voice. Because
Yeah.
obviously they can get Peter Cushing, bless him, to do the voice, even if they can digitally recreate his likeness. So yeah, I reckon there's going to be some kind of big pivotal scene. Because I think almost if they do just like a blink and you'll miss it thing, like walking by in the background of a shot, that's just not worth it. So
Yeah.
I'd like to see it be important in some way, but not exploitative. And that is just a really hard line. So I just hope they can respect that.
Yeah. We'll see. I
Yeah.
mean, I remember he was definitely in Rebels, and I think he must have been in the Clone Wars, but then they had a different voice actor, obviously. It was just,
Right. Yeah.
you have to be careful because it is a very iconic character.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
but
Peter Cushing, those cheekbones, they're like razor blades.
yeah,
Come on, they're
that's the,
amazing.
with the animation was really cool for Rebels. Like,
Mm,
but
yeah.
yeah.
Badass. Um, right. Then the next story is that the first clip from Rogue One has been released. And this is a clip that I think aired when Felicity was being interviewed by Jimmy Fallon on late night TV in America. And it's basically a brief clip showing Jin and Cassian taking out a group of stormtroopers. Did you watch the clip, Kirsty?
I did, yeah. Um, so I know you mentioned this, and it's exactly what I thought of as well. It's
Mm,
very similar to the moment where Rey is attacking the people who were trying to steal BB-8 from her, and
Yes.
Finn looks on.
Yeah.
That's okay. The cynical Kirsty here again. It's a bit of a tired trope to be like, wow, a girl can kick ass. You
Yeah.
know? It's like very clear that the male character in that moment is supposed to be like a reflection of the skeptical male fans who might be out there who are like, oh, could this girl really hold her own in this Star Wars movie? Oh, she can. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally know what you mean, and that was exactly the same thought running through my mind. It's like, oh, seriously, guys, especially because it is so similar to the way the same scene's done with Rey and Finn.
Yeah.
So it's like we just had this in the last Star Wars movie. I'm sure it's not representative. I'm sure those characters are nothing like Rey and Finn, but I kind of wish they hadn't done that because it can't help but invite comparisons. And Rogue One needs to be its own film, its own thing. So they shouldn't like be ripping themselves off so flagrantly. And like you say, it's just a generic trope having like the badass woman like kick down a bunch of soldiers. Like, and it's cool. I love to see Jim being badass and stuff. It's awesome. But
Well, it's not just that she's doing that, it's that it's drawn attention to in that way where the audience is kind of looking at it from the male character's perspective. And
yeah,
you're supposed to be surprised and impressed that she can somehow do this. But like, I don't know an awful lot about Jin's character yet in terms of her experience fighting as an adult. But Rey was a scavenger. Of course she can kick ass. Like she's doing that every day of her life.
yeah.
So
Like,
yeah.
to be fair, I think what we know about Jin, it does make sense. It should have those kind of skills. She's meant to have like been a street rat on your own since 15.
Oh, well, that's what I'm saying. That
Yeah.
it could easily be that, yeah, that's just what she does, and I don't see why it should be drawn attention to just because she's a
Oh, right.
woman.
Yeah. No, I see what you mean. It's almost like it should just be taken for granted. Like you don't need to put a big spotlight on that. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
Mm.
I mean, I get it why they're doing it because it's a very quick way to address that potential trepidation.
Yeah.
But do you need to do that at all?
I I hate to say it, but I almost think you do. Like
Oh,
because that like I don't think you do. Not it's certainly not for my sake or not for your sake, because to us that's just completely self-evident. Like it's like, yeah, she's a woman, she can handle herself. That makes sense given her background. But like this clip, it's aimed at like a mass audience of Joe public, like who are potentially being exposed to this character for the first time. And so they need really, really clear telegraphing of what she can do. And I hate to say it, but you are going to get like a bunch like people with more conservative views and like the kind of view where it's like, oh, she's a little woman. I don't understand how she could take out all those soldiers. Oh.
I guess.
Like, and they almost need a self in a point of view character to represent that perspective. I wish they didn't, but
Yeah, it just takes me out of it a little bit because it's not
mm,
even just Star Wars that you see it in. Like I said, it's a trope that you see constantly in
yeah.
things where like women do something impressive and it's like, oh, wow, for a girl. Yeah.
Yes. It's almost like these things always have an asterisk on them.
Yeah.
Impressive for a girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought the clip was funny in other ways. Like I liked the
Yeah.
bit with K2SO. That was cool. I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to seeing him.
Yeah. No, I like generally, like besides being a bit disappointed in that element of it, I thought it was a really strong clip. And I really liked it. And I thought it made me feel better about the movie. So it had like a really nice energy to it.
Hmm.
And I really liked the humor. Like you say, that joke with K2SO, like Jin shooting the first K2SO, and then the actual one coming in, and it's like, did you know that wasn't me?
Yeah.
Just like, oh yeah, I love that. That just struck exactly the right chord with me, and that was reassuring because humor can so often fall flat.
Hmm.
And it's like, yes, they made it genuinely funny. I'm proud of you guys. What did you think about the music? So that's the first time we've heard any Giacchino.
Oh, I thought it was great. I thought it fit
Yeah,
the scene really well.
yeah, no, same. It's obviously not like an iconic theme, and it's
No.
it's not like it's meant to be, but it complemented the scene nicely. And yeah, it had that like bounce and rhythm to it, which is really
Hmm.
good. Right. Then the next story, we have lots of Rogue One stories. Sorry, guys, but we're
Well,
going
this
to
one's kind of Rogue One and Episode 8.
yeah, exactly. It's like a special bonus edition. Right. And oh my goodness, yet again, it's from Anthony Brosnahan. Like you just cannot get rid of this guy. Love you, Anthony. Right. And basically, there's a timeline video that's presumably put out there to spell it out in very plain terms. This is when X happens, which is fine. So lots of people need that. There's lots of confusion about where Rogue One takes place. I haven't even attempted to explain when it takes place to some of the people I know, because I just know they cannot comprehend it.
I don't know why it's that complicated, to be honest. Like just before A New Hope.
Plenty of people just struggle perceiving films as anything other than completely disposable and throwaway entertainment.
Oh, my favorite thing this week actually has been people going, "Oh, so there's not going to be a sequel to Rogue One."
Yeah.
No matter how successful it is, I'm like, there already is one. It's Star Wars.
Yeah. When I saw like outlets reporting on that everywhere,
Oh my
I
God.
like looked at it and just shook my head and was like, "Not today, Satan."
I
Not
thought
today.
I thought it was a joke. I thought it was The Onion or something.
Yeah, I was like, why is this a story? Why does Kathleen Kennedy need to come out and say there won't be a freaking sequel to the freaking film that is a prequel
Yeah.
to a film that happens like 5 minutes after this one ends?
Hopefully when people get to the end of Rogue One, they'll realize why there isn't a sequel, because it leads directly into the actual original trilogy. Like it's right up to the point where Leia receives the plans. So
it's so dumb. Sorry.
Sorry for the rant.
Don't worry, that needed to be said. But anyway, the point here is that Anthony Broskin released this timeline video, and it indicated links between Rogue One and other things. And it indicated links between Rogue One and the Clone Wars, indicated link between Rogue One and The Empire Strikes Back, and it indicated a link between Rogue One and Episode 8. So, what do we think that link might be?
Okay, so the current theory is that it's something about the wills, because the Temple of the Wills is on Jeddah, and then we have that extract from the Journal of the Wills at the beginning of the Force Awakens novelization.
Yes,
about the resolving of grey through refined Jedi sight. And then I took that whole poem to be about like the bringing balance of the Force, to kind of recognize that the Jedi were wrong, or the Jedi of the prequel era anyway. The Sith were wrong, and there's some kind of way eventually for people to wield dark and light, and that might have been the way ancient Jedi were doing that. And I'm hoping that feeds into Episode 8 somehow, and the themes of the sequel trilogy. But it's total speculation, obviously. It could be something completely else.
That is such a good theory.
I hope that's true. Like, because I know there's been all this emphasis on Rogue One being a standalone movie, and I think that's totally possible. But it's also amazing if they can use it to expand the lore, and then that would still feed into the new trilogy.
Yeah. No, totally. Like, that's an excellent theory. I hadn't even thought about it in such intelligent or deep terms.
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of iffy with why that poem is at the beginning of the novelization, because obviously it's not mentioned explicitly in The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
And I think someone's asked Pablo Hidalgo, and he said, "Oh, Alan Dean Foster decided to add that himself." But but at the same time, I feel like it has to have some significance, and maybe they're just not allowed to elaborate on that just yet.
Yeah, like that would seem like a really weird thing for them to just say, "Yeah, Alan, just go and smack it in, go wild."
Yeah,
like,
so
I don't think that works. Yeah, like no, that's a really good theory, and I could definitely see that being the case, because, as you've said, we already know that there is like quite a lot of suggestion of the Will's presence on Jeddah, I think, which is like this place of pilgrimage for people who want to be close to the Force and believe in it and so on. So yeah, I could definitely see that being revisited. So we keep on hearing that Episode 8 is going to be the film where they really explore the nature of the Force, and they go into that in a big way that we haven't properly seen before. So yeah, I'd really like that connection. If there is any connection, I'd like it to be that. Because when I saw this, like, it made me think about this theory, this fan theory that came out at the same time. Have you seen the theory I'm alluding to, Kirsty, or would you like me to explain more?
Is it the one about the Knights of Ren?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, we did actually get an email about this, and someone said they thought it was a really interesting theory, and that like they liked the guy who came up with it. So like, I don't want to dismiss it out of hand. I definitely don't think it's correct for multiple reasons. But at the same time, I can appreciate that there was at least an argument there, and they had put some thought into it, and they'd even referenced the art of the Force Awakens, which I can always respect. It's a very respectable source.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, there are lots of reasons why that would not be the case.
How old would those characters be at this point?
I guess the question is, how old is Donnie Yen?
Right.
So that would
Well,
give you a good foundation point. Let's see. Okay, Donnie Yen. Okay, right. So Donnie Yen is 53, and Rogue One takes place approximately, oh God, maybe like 35 years before The Force Awakens. So that would put like Chirrut, like who this theory video suggests is like one of Kylo's Knights of Ren. It would mean he's like 80 at that point. Um, so yeah, like excluding the more wacky theories where there's like carbonite involved and they freeze them for some arbitrary reason and then let them out so they can serve Kylo Ren. It just wouldn't happen because
yeah.
Kylo's crew did not look like pensioners.
I don't mean to sneer at this theory in particular. It's this thing in Star Wars fandom where everyone has to be someone else.
Yes.
Like, so it's not that one in particular. It's like Snoke is so and so,
Yeah.
Rey is so and so. Like, it's just maybe the characters are new.
Yeah.
Maybe that's okay. It's a big galaxy.
Yeah. No, like in that kind of theory crafting, it's all people having fun, which is great. But it is a bit aggravating to me sometimes because those are always the theories that get the most traction. Like you look at these videos and they get hundreds of thousands of hits, and the vast majority of them are completely implausible and bizarre. It's like Snoke is Palpatine, and yeah, just theories that have no like traction to them at all and clearly aren't going to happen. But those are
Yeah.
the ones people latch onto, and I think that almost distracts from the fact that there are genuine like ways of looking at these films and approaching the characters and themes and scenarios, and then really studying them and contemplating them in order to figure out where these films might be going. And that
Yeah.
just gets missed because, like you say, it's like, oh, X is X. Oh my God, my mind is blown. Right. At that point, we will move on to our final Rogue One story, which is that we have some quotes from Kathleen Kennedy talking about the fan reception of female leads and the prospect of female directors in the Star Wars franchise. So, the first quote is from an interview Kathleen did with the New York Times, and this is how that goes. The casting of women in the lead roles of fantasy films like Rogue One, The Force Awakens, and Ghostbusters has proved unexpectedly provocative, drawing the ire of those few frustrated fans who call it a concession to political correctness. Kathleen Kennedy commented, I have a responsibility to the company that I work with, she said. I don't feel that I have a responsibility to cater in some way. She added, I would never just seize on saying, well, this is a franchise that's appealed primarily to men for many, many years, and therefore I owe men something. And then the second quote is from an interview with Variety, and this one's about the female directors in Star Wars. And it goes, we want to make sure that when we bring a female director in to do Star Wars, they're set up for success, says Kennedy. They're gigantic films, and you can't come into them with essentially no experience. Kennedy says that because there haven't been many opportunities for women to direct big movies, the Lucasfilm team is trying to identify talented Helmers at the early stages of their careers. We want to really start to focus in on people we would love to work with and see what kinds of things they're doing to progress up that ladder now, and then pull them in when the time is right. So, what did you make of these quotes, Kirsty?
Uh, well, I agree with her strongly on the idea of not catering to the few people who have a problem with female characters,
Yeah.
because it's obviously not something that affects the bottom line financially.
Mm,
These are being incredibly successful films, and they've been well received critically. Or
mm.
The Force Awakens was. We'll see what happens with Rogue One. So yeah, I completely agree with her that you shouldn't cater to people who are just being sexist. Like, that's not a good business plan.
Yes.
And you have that existing fan base, sure. Not to say that male fans of Star Wars are somehow in they're sexist. That's not it. But the idea that you want to draw in new fans, so
Yeah.
that is going to include more women, more people of color. If you want to, emphasize that you're going to have a diverse cast, like that's all. Those are all good things in my book.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's about like broadening the scope of Star Wars and extending beyond like pleasing one type of audience. like which makes me really happy. So it doesn't mean that these films they're not going to be enjoyable for men anymore, or that there's going to be nothing that like male fans can appreciate in these films. That's obviously not the case. That is not what is being said. It's just that like the primary point is that Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm are not interested in catering to the kind of people who boycotted Ghostbusters just as a concept because it was for women. It was
Right.
like, how dare you do this and touch this sacrosanct property? Like, like you should not cater to those kinds of people because that is like just misogyny, just to be opposed to something on the basis of it having women front and center. Because
Yeah.
that was like an element of the response to that film. It's not the only element, but it was an element. And yeah, so I'm pleased to see her say that she's not interested in pleasing that segment of the audience in any way.
Yeah, and I hate this idea that men can't enjoy stories about women.
Yeah, same.
It's that's damaging. It's not even true.
Yeah,
Like so
no, it's really demoralizing, and I like to think it's a minority, but like I do see that sentiment expressed. I do see, well, what characters are there in The Force Awakens for my son to identify with now? Because the only strong character is Rey. I,
obviously.
I've literally seen that. It's like,
Yeah, Kylo Ren, Finn, and Poe aren't popular at all.
yeah, it's absurd, and like
Also, like that
Mhm.
a son can't identify with Rey.
Yeah,
Like
no,
that is really
exactly.
damaging because you know young female fans have loved Luke and they loved Anakin, and sure they also love Padme and Leia, but there's this idea that female fans can identify with the male characters, but somehow it's not true in the reverse. It's just
Yeah,
ludicrous.
yeah, no, exactly. It's like there's something emasculating about a man identifying with a female character. Well, that isn't the case in reverse. And like you say, that's just so wrong. And if I had a little boy, I'd be really proud of him if he saw Ray and it's like, wow, I want to be like Ray. You know, like I'm
Hmm.
sure there are little boys who do think that, and I really hope there are boys like who play as Ray in the playground and stuff, and who want to dress up as Ray. Because why the hell not? Ray is a
Yeah.
freaking badass. It
Even
shouldn't
the
matter if you're a boy or a girl. You should still be able to enjoy that character and aspire to be like her.
Yeah, one thing I really liked about the Force, going slightly off topic here, but
Mm,
another thing I really appreciated about it was that they did kind of subvert these ideas of masculinity even in the male characters. Like
yeah,
that traditional idea of the stoic hero. Poe and Finn are both very compassionate, friendly, genuinely kind people. It's
yeah,
not like they're putting on this fake bravado or anything like that.
yeah,
Um, and Kylo Ren, he's depicted as a very emotional, sensitive character, even though he's a villain.
yeah,
And that, people find that very relatable.
yeah.
So
No, that's true. Like, and it's really interesting because Han Solo, who's like the ultimate male icon from the original trilogy, like he encapsulates like the coolest aspects of like masculinity. See, he's like a devil may care badass, like who has all the ladies and
yeah, but
he's
that's just a
charming and
front.
suave. Yeah, yeah, I know it's just a front, but it's also the kind of character archetype that is very much like from that period, like in terms of the period the film was made, the 1970s. Like, and
Yeah.
obviously you do still get like charming rogues. So it's like you have Star-Lord from Guardians of the Galaxy. It's not like that's a type of character that's extinct. But the most interesting thing I found was that in The Force Awakens, Han, he is treated like a relic, a dinosaur from a previous era. And I
Mm.
think that's part of the problem you have with Han and Kylo because they're just so complete on such completely different paradigms in terms of like the kind of people they are and the kind of masculinity they represent.
Yeah.
And yeah, but we can go into that later. So we're having a Kylo Ren spotlight. Woo! Um, but yeah, we don't have much time, so just quickly, what did you think about the comments about the female director question?
I've seen that a few people have been criticizing her for this,
Mm,
but I think what she's doing is that she's not acknowledging that a female director would be under greater scrutiny than the male directors are.
yeah,
And that is messed up, but
mm,
she's aware of it and she
yeah,
wants, when they do bring someone in, they want her to be set up for success because they know, as unfair as this double standard is, the first female director of a Star Wars film is going to be under a hell of a lot of pressure because unfortunately women are judged as a whole. If someone succeeds or fails, it's a case of, oh, okay, well, you did right by your gender.
yeah,
Whereas men are, they're given the privilege of being assessed as individuals.
yeah,
I think it's a shame. I do think that people have a point about The directors they've chosen, Ryan Johnson and Colin Trevorrow, they don't have an awful lot of experience.
Mm,
They have a few films under their belt and they've been well received. But they're not J.J. Abrams in terms of, he was brought in for the first film, and I think that was a really wise decision.
yeah.
But there are female directors out there who have films under their belts and
Mm.
are, admired for their talent, but maybe it's just not the same. Like, we do have to acknowledge that there is sexism at work here. It's not just a case of, oh, just hire a female director already and the problem will go away, because it's
Mm.
not that simple, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I think you make some really good points. Like, I totally understand where she is coming from with these comments. Like you say, you can't just hire a female director as if you were in a vacuum, and there's going to be like no comeback from that decision. That no one's going to like ever comment on the gender of the director of this film. Like, that's a pipe dream. That's not going to happen because of the type of world we live in and the way the industry works. But like, it is a bit frustrating. So I do see lots of very talented female directors, and they just don't seem to get the opportunities the male directors do. Like, and that is not Kathleen Kennedy's fault. That's not the fault of Lucasfilm. It's like an endemic problem just with the filmmaking industry. And I just kind of feel a bit frustrated because I see, especially on TV, I see lots of great like female directors working on TV.
Hmm.
And whereas like a great male TV director, he'll probably be given a chance on a film. I have seen that quite a lot, like quite a few of the Game of Thrones directors, they've gone on to make feature films based on the work they did in that show.
Yeah.
And like I don't see the female helmers of equally good episodes of shows like Game of Thrones and Westworld getting the same opportunities. And yeah, it's just like, come on, guys, you can do better than this.
Yeah, I think what she's saying is that it's going to happen. They're
Mm,
obviously being proactive and looking at people and talking
yeah.
with people, because weren't there talks a while back that they were speaking to Ava DuVernay
I've
about?
heard her name mentioned. I'm not sure if there's like been reports like official conversations, but
Yeah, it was
obviously
just like rumors.
yeah, I think it's more rumors, and obviously we know she consulted with J.J. Abrams on The Force
Yeah,
Awakens and how to give that film extra punch.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'd love to see Ava DuVernay do a Star Wars film. That'd be epic. It'd be so good because she's extremely talented. Um,
Another thing that I don't think is given enough attention is that they're not hiring female writers as much. Like,
yeah,
the books, Claudia Gray and other female writers have been doing excellent work there. But the films, and again, we're coming back to this idea that we have these female protagonists, but they're being written by men.
yeah.
And it doesn't mean that they can't be written well, but I would be really interested to see a female screenwriter.
Yeah, no, same. And that's especially striking when you think that the story group has so many female members.
Yeah.
So it's not like there's a lack of input from women on the creative side of things. But like you say, in terms of the directors they have and the screenwriters they have, they are all men. And again, it's like, come on, guys, you can do better, especially in terms of like a screenwriter, because I think a female screenwriter, like if things weren't to go perfectly, I think the female screenwriter would be insulated from that in a way that the director wouldn't be.
Hmm.
So I think as the screenwriter, you're not considered responsible for the whole project. So I'd almost like to see them try for a female screenwriter really soon, like, and then take baby steps towards female director. Because
Yeah.
they can do it, and there are plenty of incredibly talented women who deserve these chances. And you just need to give them the chances to begin with, because otherwise they're never going to get the experience Kathleen Kennedy is saying they need. It
Yeah,
reminds me of like
it's
the job market, like when I came out of university, I'd apply for all these jobs and I'd hear back from people as feedback, you don't have enough experience. And it just makes you feel so hopeless because it's like,
how do I get the
yeah,
experience?
exactly. How am I going to get the experience if no one hires me? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
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 frustration.
it's definitely a problem, and I'm glad that Kathleen Kennedy's talking about it.
Mm,
I just, yeah, it's not going to be easily solved, unfortunately, by just simply hiring one director, because if that film didn't do well, it would almost be like, oh, we're back to square one, and there's this idea that we wouldn't hire another female director because that film failed.
yeah, which would be
You know?
awful.
Yeah, I can totally see that happening,
I
or
think
at least that being part of the criticism.
I think a lot's going to ride on how Wonder Woman does next year, because obviously
Yeah.
that's directed by Patty Jenkins, and I think this marks like the first time like a woman has helmed a major Hollywood blockbuster. No, that's wrong. Has helmed a superhero film. Like I might be wrong. Please tell me if I'm wrong. Um, but yeah, so this represents like a massive gamble because I hate to say it, but if Wonder Woman bombs and people hate it, Patty Jenkins will get the blame for that,
Right.
even though she almost certainly probably wouldn't deserve the blame because if you look at how DC is doing just generally, it's clearly very badly organized.
Well, this is what I'm
So,
kind of saying about Kathleen Kennedy probably doesn't want to ruin some young female director's career if the
mm.
film doesn't go well and then she gets the blame.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally, which would be really unfair. And to be honest, I expect female directors are probably terrified about taking that property on because they're not stupid. They know the pressure they'd be under.
Yeah.
I think it would just like give any reasonable person a nervous breakdown.
Right. Yeah, that's the case. Is anyone actually coming forward and saying they want to do it? And not to mean like they don't want to do it or women don't have any interest in working on Star Wars, but that it is such a huge amount of pressure
Yeah,
to be the first, you know?
yeah. No, you'd have to be an incredibly brave soul. Let's put it that way. I'm sure it will happen. I just really hope it will happen sooner or later because I don't know. I guess just the comments seem quite wishy-washy to me. But like you say, that I think that's of necessity. She can like come out and say, yes, for the film coming out in 2020, we will have female director. That
Right,
like she
exactly.
can do that. So yeah. But right, we have talked about news for a long time. So we can move on now to the spotlight section. And this time it's going to be a Kylo Ren character discussion. This is probably going to be the first of several parts because I can always guarantee there will not be time to get through to get through all the points we have to make about this character. So there's just so much to say. So we're going to try and get through the character as he's presented in The Force Awakens and explore his journey in that film. And then we'll probably continue along this theme next week. Um, but yeah, Kirsty, I was just wondering if you wanted to kick things off by like explaining how the character is introduced and like your response to that and what you thought they were trying to convey.
I think that his entrance is fantastic because they really do play with the expectation that he's going to be the new Vader,
Mm,
which they were very much doing with the promotional material leading up to The Force Awakens.
yeah.
You know, there was this mysterious figure clothed in black. He got the mask, and obviously we hadn't seen his face yet. I think there was one promotional shot with Adam Driver's face. It was that Vanity Fair spread. Did you
Yeah.
see that?
Yeah, I did, yes.
But aside from that, it's very much about him being this anonymous, terrifying figure in all black.
Yeah.
And then you very much see that come through on in the Jakku scene when he turns up after the stormtroopers have been terrorizing the villagers, and he's cuts an imposing figure. He comes off the shuttle very dramatically, and it's all about him showcasing his powers and how ruthless and efficient he is.
Yes.
In his treatment of Poe and Lor San Tekka especially.
Mm.
What do you think about that scene?
Yeah, no, like I thought it was a great introduction to the character, and I found it interesting because even though, like you say, they really make a point of creating an ominous impression of this character, they introduce him along the lines of this is your baddie, this is your dark sider for The Force Awakens. That's very much like how he's first seen. I like how they immediately begin to like throw doubt in your mind and raise
Hmm.
questions about what this character is because
Yes.
obviously you realize that there's this prior link between him and Lord Santeca. Like, you can't deny the truth that is your family. And like Kylo very promptly tries to deny it by presumably cutting Lord Santeca's head off. Um, and yeah, like that's interesting because you don't get that with Vader in A New Hope. I think lots of people, when they first saw A New Hope, they actually thought Vader was a robot.
Mm.
And you can understand why that is because you really don't get much of a sense of Darth Vader as a live and breathing human. He's just a really tall guy in a suit who's great at being scary and intimidating. And with Kylo, while the first visuals of him you get, they support that impression. Like this, as soon as words come out, as soon as he starts interacting with other people, you realize how acutely human this character is, and that immediately gives him like a different vibe and a different flavor. Did you find that?
Yeah, I feel like as soon as he starts talking, you can immediately see that it's a young man in there.
Yes.
In the way he like swaggers around and he obviously feels like he has something to prove. And it's almost like petulant the way he's talking to Lor San Tekka.
Yes.
Like, oh, you're so right. Like trying to have the upper hand, but actually just betraying the fact that he has all these emotions.
Yeah.
And he's like going out of his way to appear like he doesn't care.
Yeah.
And then I might have mentioned this before, but I think the interaction he has with Poe there is very interesting as well.
Mm,
Because Poe is like, oh, who talks first? You can tell that he's not really that afraid of Kylo Ren.
yeah.
And I don't think he knows who he is, but there's something about him that
Mm,
it's obviously supposed to be like, oh, he isn't the same as Vader, even though he wants to be and looks like him, he's
yeah.
not, because no one would ever talk to Vader like that.
Yeah. No, exactly. I think like he is perceived like as a petulant child in in many ways, and he doesn't do himself many favors on that front because he often acts like one.
Yeah.
um, and like you say, I think Poe in that scene he's like responding to like how like contemptuous this character seems. Like he can't feel too afraid of him because like he knows that's a human guy under there. Like Vader, he was more like machine than man by the point of the original trilogy. Not so with Kylo.
Yeah, well, when Poe says it's hard to tell with all of your apparatus,
Yeah,
um, it's like, yeah, because he doesn't need to wear that mask. He's
yeah,
doing it to appear scary.
yeah, exactly. Which is really funny. It's almost like people, if they don't know, they just sense that from how Kylo carries himself and behaves. Like, and I can buy that because there is just something about his body language that communicates so much about that character. Like, you can just tell from the way he walks that he's like insecure, that he's boiling over with this like energy that he can't hide, and that affects how other people treat him and speak about him and stuff. And it's really interesting.
Yeah. What do you think about him noticing Finn and then choosing not to do anything at that moment?
I love that. So it just adds like another layer of intrigue to
Mm,
like both characters because you're like, why is he looking at him? What's he seeing there? Like, what's caught his attention? And obviously, that's an intentional mystery. Like, but like, and like you say, it does tell you something immediately about Kylo because if Vader had had that sense, the goodness of one of his stormtroopers, and sense that he was disobeying orders, he wouldn't have hesitated to like have him killed or have him imprisoned.
yeah.
But Kylo, he just stays quiet about it. Like,
Yeah.
and
Uh,
yeah, immediately creates this vibe, this very ambiguous character where you don't understand his motives.
Okay, I could be wrong,
Hmm.
but I seem to remember, I think it might have been the editor, Mary, oh, what's her name? The editor of The
Oh,
Force Awakens. It's like
oh God.
Mary Ann Brandon or something.
Yes, Marianne Brandon.
Um,
Yeah.
I seem to remember her being interviewed at some point and saying that the scene with Kylo saying he feels the call to the light,
Hmm.
that was supposed to be in response to him letting Finn go. It was originally supposed to be much earlier in the movie.
Yes, you're
So
right.
it's
He
this
did say
idea that
that.
he felt compassion for Finn. He recognized that he didn't want to be doing this thing and he let him go.
Mm.
It wasn't just a case of him being unsure about something.
Yes.
He saw that Finn was rejecting what was going on and he let him go.
Yeah.
And it was like his compassion made him fail.
Mm.
And that's why he has these tantrums, I think.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I think that scene is just another reminder of like Kylo's fatal flaw, which is just
Yeah.
the fact that he is weak in the sense that he is compassionate and like he does have mercy where Darth Vader would not have had mercy. And that's what frustrates him about himself because he doesn't want to feel that. He doesn't want to be merciful.
Yeah, and I find that really interesting about Kylo and Finn's dynamic
Mm,
that he projects onto Finn, and by the end of the film, obviously feels this, hatred and wants to attack him and hurt him.
yeah.
But it's almost because Finn is a representation of his compassion and how that makes him fail.
Yes. Yeah. No, exactly. I think Finn embodies a lot of what Kylo could have been. And I think that registers with Kylo on a very acute level, and it's very painful to him. Like,
Yeah.
and it just makes all of his self-loathing and self-hatred even that much more intense.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how their dynamic evolves across the trilogy.
Yeah, no, definitely, it's going to be very curious because obviously everyone's talking like about Kylo and Rey and what's going to happen with those characters, but I think people often forget that there is a very important link between Kylo and Finn as well.
Yeah.
Like not just in because those characters share a direct connection, which they do, but also because they both had relationships with characters who mean something to the other character, if
Hmm.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right, so we'll keep on moving along. And then the next like element of Kylo in The Force Awakens that is worth discussing is kind of like how Kylo fits into the First Order, and also like the relationship with Snoke, because that's essentially what most of what we see with Kylo after the scene where he's on Jakku. And yeah, you get the delicious sniping between Kylo and Hux,
Yeah.
which is highly amusing. What did you make of the dynamic between those characters, Kirsty?
I think it's immediately obvious that they don't see eye to eye.
Yes.
And that they do kind of embody these two kind of opposing in a way sides of the dark side in terms of the politics and military tactics side of it,
Mm,
and then the more spiritual aspect.
yes.
And you kind of get hints of that same thing in A New Hope, right, with Vader talking to the other people, like in that imperial context, and they're talking about like his phony religion or whatever they say.
Mm.
It's kind of like there's something that they can't understand, and I'm guessing that Hux is kind of in that same vein that he just doesn't understand Kylo, doesn't really respect him very much. Like they just have completely different objectives, but somehow they have to find a way to work together.
Yeah. I think it was in I can't remember. No, I can't remember where it was now. But I saw someone make the comparison that Kylo and Hux are like church and state. So
Right.
Kylo's church, Hux's state, and
Yeah,
I
that's a good point.
I love that analogy. It just struck me as so perfect because like Hux is so like grounded, and like he's clearly like the logistics man. He's like, okay, we need this many space credits to get the evil death weapon built, and he's probably been like working on budgeting for that thing since he was like 6. And then Kylo, he's like just so heavily ideological. And like I think Adam Driver himself has drawn like parallels with Kylo as a terrorist.
Hmm.
So like the kind of young man like who sees these like ideological organizations and thinks that's the kind of cause that I want to fight for, that's the kind of cause I believe in. And so he like goes towards that rather than the kind of environment he was born in. It's like a form of rebellion, and also it's like identifying with this other system that represents a contrast to the one he was previously familiar with. And yeah, it's just so interesting because obviously they don't go into any great depth because The Force Awakens is very fast paced and of necessity, but you really do get the sense that Kylo he doesn't really fit very naturally into the First Order. Like, and it's even more extreme there than it ever was with Darth Vader, I think, because obviously Darth Vader he stood out in the Empire. He clearly wasn't like quite in there with the officers club, but he did have a place, you know, like even Leia, she like recognized Darth Vader as like Tarkin's like lapdog
Yeah.
almost. So people knew what he was doing there. Whereas like Kylo, he just kind of like strides in and is like, do the thing, do the thing. And yeah, people they like obey him, but they obey him kind of because they've just been told they have to obey him,
Right.
like not because they really understand why he's there or what the hell he's doing.
Yeah. There are a couple of scenes where they do draw attention to the fact that he's not really involved. Like when Hux is giving the speech at the rally,
Mm,
Kylo is very pointedly not there. He's on the destroyer and then watches the Starkiller fire
yeah,
towards the Republic. And that's supposed to be a moment where he's isolated and feeling something by himself.
yeah.
And then obviously you also get the bit where he's talking to Vader's helmet. So it's this idea that there's only the helmet that he can talk to in the whole organization. He doesn't have any friends or confidants.
Yeah.
He's talking about how Snoke suspects something, so he doesn't really feel like he can talk to him either.
Mm. That's a really
So
good point, actually. I hadn't thought about that. That's actually really sad
it is.
that there's no one alive who Kylo feels he can talk to, so he has to talk to the mask of his dead grandfather. That's
Yeah.
really depressing.
Yeah. He's clearly supposed to be a lonely person.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like, I think it's also very telling that when Kylo has that heart to heart with Vader's mask, he himself keeps his mask on, which is absurd because it's not like it's for anyone else's sake. It's purely for his own sake in that scene because there's no one else there. Like, but he still keeps the mask on. And it's like, boy, you do not need to keep the freaking mask on when you're on your own. You have nothing to prove. But then he does have something to prove, so he has to prove it to himself that he's like this hard, like emotionless badass.
Yeah. And when he's saying words, you can kind of hear his voice break as if he's crying inside the mask. But
Yeah.
because he has the mask on, it probably doesn't it's he doesn't have to accept that that's what's happening.
Yeah. No, exactly. It's so much that character is like about self-denial. And yeah, like it's a very interesting just type of character. Like because you often see these criticisms of Kylo as like emo. It's like, oh, he's so emo. And like that just gets me because like people use emo as like a way to discredit people's emotions
Mm.
and like to discount them as having like any relevance or importance. And I'm sorry, but people are people. Even men, believe it or not, get emotional and feel like this conflict and like profound fear and insecurity. And like that's what Kylo does. He like represents all those like deep emotions and fears and turmoils.
Yeah, I think it's a real problem in society where, men aren't encouraged to express their emotions
Yeah,
and maybe do feel as isolated as someone like Kylo does, where they can't talk to anyone about those deep-seated fears.
yeah.
I mean, I really think that he is supposed to, and as you mentioned, Adam Driver has called him a terrorist, and I think JJ did in the Force Awakens commentary as well.
Mm,
He is supposed to represent that idea of the radicalized young man who dreams of the days of the Empire that were before he was even alive.
yeah,
And you can see that happening today. It's
yeah.
something that I really think that he's supposed to be a villain that's very relevant to today's modern age and the politics that are going on.
Yeah, no, I think just yesterday an interview between Adam Driver and Michael Shannon came out, and like they were both talking about how their films are socially conscious. And like Adam Driver, he made this point about in Star Wars, there are these two organizations, the Resistance and the First Order. They're both absolutely convinced they're right and that they're doing the right things for the right reasons. Like, but obviously they can't both be right because they're completely ideologically opposed.
Hmm.
And that is relevant because you do see that all the time in our modern society. Like, because these terrorist groups, even though they seem completely reprehensible and evil to us, they don't to the people who are in them, not to the people who choose to go to them. And yeah, I find it interesting that like that's the kind of theme that they've picked up on for Star Wars and also for the character of Kylo in particular because yeah, it raises questions about what are they going to do by drawing that analogy, because it's either going to be, well, they're all goners then, or there's going to be some like suggestion of hope or like a future there. But yeah, that'll probably be a separate redemption discussion at some point.
Yeah.
What did you get from Kylo's relationship with Snoke?
Oh, okay. Well, there's obviously a ton of backstory that we don't have here.
Mm,
Hopefully we'll get more in eight.
yeah,
Um, but I think it's creepy as hell.
yes,
Like,
it really is.
there's a conversation between them in the novelization that was cut from the film,
Mm,
but Snoke is talking about Kylo in these really creepy ways, like that he is a sculptor and Kylo is this like wonderful piece of material that he can sculpt something beautiful out of, and
yeah.
that he's the perfect embodiment of light and dark, which I think is really interesting because
Mm,
we've never really heard of someone who practices on the dark side described in that way before, that he has equal potential for both sides of the Force,
yeah,
which I do think kind of hints towards where things might be going for him. I hope that he can eventually balance the two
yeah,
and find peace. Um, but it's just you kind of get this vibe from Snoke that, as Leia says, he was watching. He was there in the background. He was always there waiting to
mm,
lure Ben Solo away. And there's this idea of seduction to the dark side.
yeah,
It does not make me feel good. What about
yeah.
you?
No, it has really icky vibes. Like, it's not the kind of dynamic you want to think about too much almost because, like I say, those vibes are there, and it's just really disturbing.
Yeah,
It does like raise analogies to things like grooming,
right.
like in real world terms, and like again to tie back to like the whole radicalization theme in real life, you do find that these like young boys they are like drawn to these like charismatic like older powerful male figures who like offer them like a system that they can connect to and aspire towards that they feel like they lacked before. And I think Snoke's kind of analogous to that, like it's in like tempting Kylo into like this new ideological system. Like,
Yeah, and giving him a new name and not allowing people to give like just to say his birth name,
yeah,
that he can't be known as Ben Solo anymore or whatever his surname turns out to be. So when Han says it on the bridge, that must be the first time he's heard the name Ben in a long time.
Yes.
And that does something to people's identity. You know, you take away their name. We
Mm,
see it in the reverse almost when Poe gives Finn his name.
yeah. That's a
And
really
I
good
think,
point.
yeah, it's an important part of people understanding themselves as individuals and how they relate to the world around them.
Yeah. That is a really, really good point, actually, now I think about it, because you have a character who's denied his name, and then another character who is very much like the complementary character to Kylo in The Force Awakens, and he's given a name and he embraces it wholeheartedly. So you have one character who's like embracing everything with open arms, and another one who's like rejecting everything and pushing it away. And
Yeah.
yeah, like it's another good like stress of how Finn and Kylo are like these perfect counterpoints to each other.
Oh,
And all,
definitely. Like Kylo is desperate to rid himself of his humanity, and Finn is just finding his.
yeah,
So,
no, they're both like on parallel trajectories, but like different directions almost.
yeah,
But hopefully
very
that stops
interesting.
somewhere. Um, but yeah, like I found the dialogue in the novelization about Kylo particularly creepy. Like you say, it's all that stuff. Like it just calls to mind like themes of possession and stuff, like treating him as like this material that he owns and can mold as he pleases. And yeah, it's just not nice.
Yeah, when we get to the point on the bridge scene again, when Han's saying Snoke is using you,
Mm,
it is clear that Kylo knows that, but
yeah,
doesn't seem to value his own life enough to recognize that that's a problem and he needs to deal with it somehow.
yeah,
It's like he just doesn't have any sense of his own self-worth.
yeah. And I remember, I think in the script, they make a point of saying that Snoke's tone becomes like fatherly, after Hux leaves, like in the first scene when it's like Hux, Snoke, and Kylo. So like they make a point of stressing that Snoke adjusts how he presents himself when he's with Kylo alone, because it's like there's this whole special relationship with Kylo that isn't there with Hux.
He's fatherly and he's telling him that he needs to kill his own father as a
Mm.
test. That is just horrific.
It is. I think it's all very much about how I am your father now. I'm the male authority figure that you need to dedicate yourself to, so you cannot have this prior male authority figure who might distract from that.
Mm.
I think that's a big part of why killing Han is such a test and something that Snoke requires him to do, because Kylo can't have two fathers. Like, and Snoke is like determined to be the only like authority figure in that sense in Kylo's life.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very interesting. Um, right. There's oh yeah, there's another thing I'd like to say about the scene where he's talking to Vader's helmet, and it's that he says, "Show me again," and I think it's the power of the dark side. And I was just wondering, do you think that means that he's had some kind of vision before? Like that he believes was sent from Vader, or do you think he saw like Anakin or something?
I think he might have.
Mm.
Um, it's one of my kind of pet headcanons that I'm not too attached to, but I think has merit that he has had a vision before, and just like Rey sees him in her vision, he might have seen her,
Yes.
and that's why he's so like, oh, you need to stay with me and I'll teach you.
Hmm.
Like, that he is somehow feeling like his destiny is on the dark side and that Vader sent that to him. It probably wasn't Vader because we know that Anakin was redeemed, but it could be Snoke kind of manipulating things in the background.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I actually have an even more elaborate version of that
Oh, okay.
theory.
Go for it.
Um, and it's that obviously Rey, when she gets her vision, like that's channeled through the lightsaber, the Skywalker lightsaber.
Yeah.
And going by Kylo's reaction to the saber when he finally sees it at the end of The Force Awakens, it seems pretty clear to me that he's probably seen that lightsaber before, if not possessed it himself. So I like the idea that when he was younger, maybe like a teenager at Luke's academy, like he touched the lightsaber, and touching the lightsaber for Kylo, just like touching the lightsaber for Rey, it triggers the vision. And that, but that Kylo's vision, it sends him off on a really dark and bad direction, whereas Rey's appears to send her off in a good direction towards Luke and helping the Resistance.
Yeah, I think that's totally possible because I think that they originally did have in the shooting script that they were going to show how Maz stole the saber from Kylo and the Knights of Ren.
Yes.
So I think he was originally supposed to have it. And we only get that hint of it in the finished film when he says that lightsaber belongs to me, but you don't know whether to believe him or not. He might just be feeling entitled to it.
Yeah. No, exactly. I like the idea of them both having like parallel but converging visions. so that we're going to revisit the vision in episode 8, but then we're going to see a different side to things. And that because like the two characters are going to like put both their sides of things into like one channel, then that will allow for a full picture of exactly what went down in the past.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's heavily speculative, so who knows? Should
Yeah.
save that for an episode 8 predictions video, probably. Oh, so many podcast spotlight topics, man.
Yep.
It's funny because you talk to people and you say you have a Star Wars podcast, and you can tell they think, "How do you find things to say?" And I feel like saying, "Oh, you have no idea."
Yeah, we overanalyze everything. That's how we do it.
We spend half an hour talking about a single line. Right. To keep things moving, then we will talk about Kylo and Rey. So obviously Kylo hearing about Rey and then tracking her down and kidnapping Rey and interrogating Rey and so on and so forth. Um, so yes, what struck you about Kylo's dynamic with Rey, Kirsty? So it's quite a big question. It's like saying, what's the meaning of life, Kirsty?
Well, I do feel like there's almost this um, destiny idea that they were predestined to meet.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if it's like the will of the Force, because it's almost like as soon as Kylo hears about the girl from Mitaka,
Mm,
that becomes his focus.
yes.
And I know he goes to Takadana and it's like, oh yeah, the droid was spotted in the forest with a girl, but it's not the droid he goes after.
Yeah.
He goes after Rey, and again, it might come back to this idea that he's seen her in a vision.
Mm,
But it might also be something that never ends up being quite explained, that they're just somehow drawn together.
yeah. No, it's really interesting to me because early on The Force Awakens, you get the sense that Kylo's obsessed with finding this map, obsessed with finding his uncle. But then as soon as, like you say, as soon as he hears about the girl, then it's like his whole trajectory changes, and suddenly it's all about Rey. Like right up until like he finds out that Han is on the Starkiller base, like it's all about Rey for him. Like the map itself fades almost completely into the background. And yeah, it's just really interesting to me that they made that decision because they're clearly trying to convey to the viewer that Kylo is unduly fascinated by this girl. And it does raise the question of why is just the prospect of this girl on Jakku helping the stormtrooper escape the droid, why does that pique his interest to the extent that it does? And I don't think we're meant to understand the answer to that yet. If there even is an answer, who knows? There's like 50 mysteries they need to explain.
Yeah,
That might be one of the ones that get stitched.
obviously logically we know that Kylo has come into contact with other people who are very strong in the Force before. Like
Mm,
he was part of Luke's academy, or not academy, but whatever you want to call it. And he has this relationship with Snoke, who we're guessing is Force sensitive.
mm,
Um, but he is so rattled by the fact that Rey is so strong in the Force that she can hold her own against him and she defeats him twice. It's like that just becomes the new focus for him. And like he's even defending her powers to Snoke when it's
mm,
like, oh, she resisted you. And he's saying, well, she's strong in the Force, she's untrained, but he's genuinely impressed by what she's able to do.
mm.
So she just somehow kind of takes over as the priority for him. And then I know that Snoke says, bring her to me. But at the end of the film, again, he's saying, you need a teacher. It's not really about Snoke in that moment. It's not about what he's necessarily been ordered to do.
Yeah,
He's lost his focus.
yeah, no, true. And it's all I can show you the ways of the Force, not Snoke can show you the ways of the Force.
Yeah, I think again it comes back to this idea that he's so lonely, and he says that to Rey, right, when he's reading her mind.
Yeah,
It's almost like he could be talking about himself. Like
yes,
you really see that as polar opposite as these two characters seem to be, they also have a lot of common ground, and it's ground that they wouldn't want to admit to anyone and not anyone else.
yeah,
But because they've read each other's minds, they know how lonely and isolated and unhappy the other person is.
mm,
And even though Rey has these developing relationships with other people like Finn and Han,
yeah,
because they're not Force sensitive and they haven't been in her mind that same way, they can't know her in the same way that Kylo does now, even though it was such a brief moment.
yeah. No, exactly. There's this suggestion of there being like a profound connection between those characters that is unique to them because they're also the only two young Force users in this movie. And that is significant because obviously there's Leia, but that's a very, very different kind of relationship because she's Kylo's mum, and she's also like a motherly figure to Rey herself, like when they hug at the end of The
Mm.
Force Awakens. Um, so yeah, they're like on a level footing in a way no other characters are. And I really like that about The Force Awakens in general. You find that there's lots of complementary characters. Like it's like we were saying with Finn and Kylo. Those characters complement each other so well and they like make really good counterpoints and it's really fascinating to see how they interact and bounce off each other. And I think it's the same with Kylo and Rey, just in a different sense because they're coming at that dynamic from a very different place to what Kylo and Finn are.
Yeah, for sure. I think all of the new main characters have been written really well as a whole. They're not written in isolation. Like they're all connected and kind of bounce off each other and complement each other in these really interesting ways.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's why it's good to when you do these character analyses, and that's why it's so helpful to talk about the characters' relationships with other characters as well, because it can be a bit of a trap to just discuss the characters as like islands. But all these characters, and especially the characters in The Force Awakens, you can't understand them unless you think about the interplay between them and the characters that surround them.
Yeah. I think if you look at what someone is reacting to, you can kind of gauge why something is happening. So
Mm,
when he goes back to Rey's cell after being told to bring the girl to me by Snoke, she's not there and he has this tantrum. Again, it comes back to this idea that he underestimated her, just like he did with Finn. He didn't quite understand that it meant that Finn would leave,
mm,
um, and that he would betray the First Order. And he didn't think that Rey would be able to get away. He just didn't even consider it. And now he's
yes.
angry at himself for allowing that to happen. So he has that tantrum, and you kind of get that funny interplay with him and the stormtroopers walking away. But it
Mm,
does very quickly show you that this is a pattern for Kylo, that when he fails, that this is how he reacts. He's so angry at himself.
mm, yeah. No, exactly. Like, there's so much projection involved. It's really funny.
Yeah.
Um, what did you think about like the kind of things that Kylo was saying to Rey, like in the interrogation? Because like that interrogation scene in itself is interesting because it forms such a counterpoint to the interrogation with Poe earlier in the movie, which
Yes.
we kind of glossed over before. But yeah, it's important to again all this talk like about comparing things and thinking about character dynamics and like parallels between them. Like with Kylo and Poe, like there is so much like emphasis on like the utilitarian violence of that scene, like and how dark and grim and foreboding it is. Like this interrogation with Poe is still very much about stressing this Kylo's this really creepy, intimidating badass.
Hmm.
Like, and there's no humanity to him really, aside from like his snarkiness, which is equally matched by Poe. But then with Rey, it's just a completely different quality to the scene because like it starts off with him crouched before her, just looking up at her, and that's immediately very strange because that like almost suggests like subservience to her in some bizarre way, and it just makes no sense because the captor should not be in that kind of position in relation to their captive,
Mm.
and just the lighting is different, and of course like the interactions are completely different. So yeah, what did you make of all that, Kirsty?
Yeah, I think the way that the scenes are lit and blocked tells us a
Mm,
lot about the contrast because when Poe's in the chair and Kylo's stood up at full height, the angles of the camera are supposed to show that he's this very imposing, looming presence.
mm,
And then, as you said, in Rey's interrogation, he starts crouched down on the floor, and there's lots of lighting that kind of bathes Rey in light as she's in the chair, and he's
mm,
looking up at her. And then when he stands up to remove his helmet, just
yeah,
because she said that he was a creature in a mask.
yeah,
Like, why would he care about taking his mask off to put her at ease somehow? Or
yes,
subverting her expectations? Why should he care what this girl thinks?
yeah, no,
Um,
definitely,
and then when he starts going towards her to read her mind, apparently to get the map, he's like immediately distracted with all of these personal thoughts. And
mm,
it's invasive and unsettling.
yeah,
But it's also like, why the hell is he doing this? Why does he care if she's lonely or afraid or can't sleep?
yeah,
So I do think that that language is supposed to be about the both of them.
yeah,
You can see it kind of play across his face.
yeah. No, with Poe, like that scene, it's all about like just getting straight to the point, just wanting to learn what on earth he's done with this map. Like there's no interest whatsoever, like in Poe as a person, beyond like saying, haha, you failed. lols. Like that's the vibe. Whereas with Kylo, when he's with Rey, you just sense this like profound fascination with her, and obviously it is wrong and completely oversteps boundaries because you shouldn't just invade someone's mind in order to learn more about them. But like you do get a sense with Kylo where in that interrogation scene he goes into Rey's mind like first and foremost to find out more about her as a person, like rather than like to search for the map. And that's stressed even more strongly in the novelization, where they make it clear that he's completely distracted and that he essentially almost forgets about the map for a while because he's
Yeah.
just searching around her
Well,
mind.
you can see that in the scene itself because like he's crouched down by her talking about her thoughts, and then when she says get out of my head, he steps back and says, "Right, but I do still need to get this map from you." It's like he's always reminding himself that that's why they're there.
Yeah,
Um yeah, it's really interesting.
yeah. No, it is a fascinating scene, and it's obviously a very divisive scene that's provoked a lot of commentary.
Oh,
But
I've
yeah.
also seen people complain about how long this scene goes on for,
Oh,
which
really?
I do think that's a good point because this film, we said before, it's so fast paced. There's
Mm,
so much going on. So I think it's actually important to note that J.J. Abrams decided to take the time here to have this back and forth between these two characters.
yeah.
Like it's obviously supposed to be important because he spent valuable minutes on it.
Yes.
And with this, like, you see the camera pan over to Kylo as he's like trying to get into her mind, and then it pans back to her, and it's like this wrestling match.
Yeah.
And there's all this amazing sound that we've talked about before. Um, yeah, I think it speaks volumes
Mm,
that he took the time to actually linger on this moment. It's obviously supposed to establish this profound connection between the two characters.
yeah. No, like so I think that scene is almost unique in The Force Awakens. You could almost say that all the Kylo and Rey scenes are, but there's this special quality to it you don't find anywhere else in the film, and you see that in people's responses to it. Like when people talk about that scene, well, they either don't talk about it, or they talk about it in terms that clearly convey that people don't quite know what to make of it, like they don't know what they're
Mm,
seeing there. And I do think there's meant to be confusion because so much of it is like Kylo speaking in code. Like, don't be afraid, I feel it too. What do you feel, Kylo?
right.
Please expand. It's yeah, it's so unclear. Like it's unclear to the point of being frustrating sometimes, but that's also what makes it so fun and interesting to discuss.
Yeah, and the other two moments between these two characters when things kind of slow down is when he first finds her in the forest and like
Mm,
starts to walk towards her very slowly,
yeah,
and then is reading in her mind, "Oh, you've seen the map. Okay, so now I'm deciding to take you instead of the droid. We
yeah,
have what we need." And the other moment is when they're on the cliff edge
yes,
and there's the choker shots back and forth with him looking at her and then she
yeah,
closes her eyes. And the film does slow down and you can kind of hear it in the sound as well,
mm,
that it's like something important is going on here, even if it seems really ambiguous at the moment.
yeah. No, you are meant to be struck by the dynamic between those characters. Like, which when we discuss the commentary, J.J. Abrams himself makes it very clear that you're meant to be struck by there's something more going on here. Um, and yeah, it's just very exciting. And you talking about those choker shots when they're fighting the forest at the end. Oh, like that just brings back happy memories of seeing that sequence in the Science Museum, 70 millimeter. It's
Oh
just
yeah.
so overwhelming. It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Did you see Force Awakens 70 millimeter?
Yes, I did the first time I saw it. I saw it in
Oh,
70.
that's so good. Did that really strike you as well? That particular sequence with like the choker shots, the great big close-ups, just
Oh,
feeling at the
definitely.
screen.
The
Yeah.
scene that was most impressionable to me was the interrogation. I
Mm,
came out of it like raving about the chemistry that was in that scene. It was just so intense.
yeah.
Um, but that moment on the cliff edge as well, it's like the sound is used really well because it is like everything slows down and they have kind of the force theme as Rey is like channeling up the force to strike back at him.
Yeah.
But there is this back and forth between them that it's like, why is the director choosing to focus on this?
Yeah.
It's not it's not like Vader and Luke fighting. It's not just another action scene.
Mm,
Like something personal is happening here. And I
mm,
think it's supposed to show the character's development, like the coming back to the idea that Finn and Kylo are foils to each other. Kylo and Rey obviously are. So throughout the film, Kylo is on a downward spiral, right?
Mm,
Like he comes in at the beginning and he's the boss and everyone's supposed to be scared of him and everything. And then
yeah.
by the end, he is completely wrecked. And the end is when Rey finally decides to pick up the saber and be the hero. Like she's been trying to run away from it for the whole movie. She didn't want to leave Jakku. She didn't want to really face the fact that she had all these amazing powers and can do stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so they are kind of going past each other in that converse way.
Yeah. No, definitely. It's so interesting. It's going to be very exciting to see what happens to those characters in episode 8. Right, to get to the like final big scenes with Kylo, we obviously have the very emotional scene where he's reunited with his father, and then the subsequent scene in the forest, which we've already touched upon in relation to the dynamic with Rey there. And yeah, obviously the scene with Han is one of the most controversial and conversation provoking elements of The Force Awakens for obvious reasons because it's Han freaking Solo.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I really liked it as like a character piece for both of those people. I think it's like as I touched upon earlier, it's almost like you have two very different forms of masculinity being embodied by those characters in that scene. Like they are obviously characters first and foremost, but I like how Han is like this alpha male, like, and he's always been like ultra macho and like the embodiment of everything that like the male viewer wishes he could be. Whereas Kylo is almost like everything that the male viewer like hates to accept about himself, like all the emotions and all the self-doubt and all the insecurity. Like and it's all there and it's so painfully obvious because it's all on show. And you have both those characters coming together. And I just find that a really interesting dynamic because there's tragedy there because even though Han is trying to like commune with his son and understand him and like get him on his side again, like it's not quite enough. He can't do it, and that's obviously why it ends so badly.
Yeah. I don't want to speak for anyone else, but
Mm,
from a very personal perspective, this scene really hits me hard because I don't have the best relationship with one of my parents.
mm,
And I can see a lot of that dynamic in these interactions, the idea that people can love each other,
yeah,
but there is this fundamental disconnect or miscommunication, or somehow it's too late for one of the parties.
yeah,
It's really heartbreaking. But I think it's part of what makes Kylo a very relatable character for some people.
yeah. I think there's these character dynamics at the heart of Star Wars that people really do associate themselves with and latch onto because they do ring so true on a like a deep level. Like obviously it's all exaggerated and like overly dramatic because it's all set in space and these people have laser swords and stuff. But at the core of it there is something very real and very human. And you can see these like characters interacting with each other and like the emotions and the feelings there. And you can relate to that.
Mm,
And yeah, and I think that's what makes Star Wars so like enduring and powerful for people. Because if it were just like robots and spaceships and stuff without any of the human elements, it would all be pretty meaningless when you get to the bottom of it. But
yeah.
there is more to it than that.
I do find it interesting that the emotional climax of the scene is between the antagonist and his father.
Mm,
I know on a superficial level it's supposed to parallel Vader killing Obi-Wan, but
yeah,
it really doesn't in terms of the emotion in that scene.
yeah,
I know because of the prequels we now know that Anakin and Obi-Wan were like brothers. So
yeah,
that lends a bit more weight to it, but even still in A New Hope, it doesn't have that emotion.
yes,
Um, but Rey is the observer in this situation. So even though she's the protagonist, it's not really about her in this moment. And a lot is made about the fact that Han is a father figure to her. And that's very important to her because she hasn't had that before.
yeah,
But she's known Han for a very short space of time at this point. And Kylo's the one who actually has blood connection to this character and has that history with him.
yeah.
So it's very much his emotional climax, not necessarily hers.
Yeah, no, exactly. You almost forget Ray and Finn are there, like apart from the like brief cutaways to like them on the balcony. It is very much like Han and Kylo scene.
Yeah, I think
And
Finn and Rey are almost like the embodiment of the audience in that scene.
yeah,
They're one
totally.
trepidation. They're hopeful that Kylo will make the right decision. They have this
Mm,
look of hope before horror, but it's not really about them. It's about the two people on the bridge.
Yeah, no, that's totally right. Um, it's just so well acted. Like those performances, they're just so great in that scene.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, you really feel the power of it. And I love how you see Kylo like he starts to tear up and become emotional, like because it just becomes too much for him. Like when he's saying I'm being torn apart, like and you know for a fact that he means every single word he says.
Yeah.
Like there's no deceit there. He's not trying to mislead or trick his father. He's just in this state of acute psychological distress. And and it's even more heartbreaking because you can see how that breaks Han's heart in turn.
Yeah.
Because this is his little boy. Like he does not want to see his little boy being sad. Like because for all like Han is like in many ways like the ultimate like guy, like the embodiment of like these masculine archetypes. Like he is like emotional and a softie deep down. He loves Leia. The core of
Hmm.
his story in the original trilogy is a love story, and that they end up getting married and having a baby, and it's lovely. Um, and yeah, like the that scene is the climax of Han's journey, not just in The Force Awakens, but across all the films, is that is him finally facing up to the responsibility of his child and literally giving his life for his child's sake. He didn't go there wanting to die, but he must have known that that was a risk he stood because of what his son had become at that point and the nature of where he was going in order to try and get him back.
Yeah, I don't think he truly allows himself to understand the horror of the situation because for psychological reasons, it would be hard to accept. Um, when he's talking about one boy ruined it all or
Mm,
destroyed it all, like it's obviously not clear that he's talking about his son at that point.
yeah,
Um, and then when he's talking to Leia, he kind of brushes it off as, oh, there's nothing more we could have done. There's too much
yeah,
Vader in him. It's not until he sees Ben and decides to call out and go across to him
mm,
that it really hits him what's happened,
yeah,
and he has to face this and do whatever he can to help.
yeah. No, I think like obviously it's difficult to say because we really don't know much about what the relationship between Kylo and Han was like when Ben was like a child, and we don't know that much about the background there. But you almost get the sense that this is like the first time that he's truly like been able to like connect, like and really acknowledge what his son is and like in what a desperate state he is and how much he needs his help.
Yeah, there are little clues in Bloodline that they weren't particularly close because
Mm,
obviously at the time that book's set, he's been off with Luke. We don't know how long, but he's not been with his family,
yeah,
or his mother and father anyway. And then there's these bits that Leia's thinking about Han mentoring other younger pilots,
yes.
and that you almost get the sense that he's trying to fill this void. And
Mm,
then when he meets Rey, she might be in that vein as well,
mm,
that he immediately connects with this young person who is like his son in ways that he doesn't quite appreciate yet. I
yeah,
don't think, yeah, that they have this force sensitivity, but he doesn't know that. He's focusing on the fact that she's great with mechanics and a great pilot
mm,
and can help him in that way. So
yeah.
it's really quite sad.
It is very sad. I think, like you say, a lot of Han it's about like denial and like running away from like what his actual situation is and what his son is.
Mm.
And just fate doesn't allow him to escape from that properly. Like, and it just keeps on coming back to bash him over the head of it.
Yeah, I think because of that though, I this scene is going to be crucial to the rest of the story.
Totally.
Like, because as JJ says, Kylo instantly regrets what he's done.
Mm,
So that has to have an impact on his arc for the rest of the trilogy.
yeah.
Otherwise, it's like, oh, that didn't happen.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's not an accident that like the final scene with like Han is Han like touching his son's face. Like
Yeah.
and that's after he knows he's dead. Basically because he's obviously been gutted with the lightsaber and he still has that forgiveness and love and compassion for his son.
Yeah, I think in one of the Junior novels, they even say something about Han hopes that one day his son can forgive him in turn.
Yeah.
To think that after your son just stabbed you
Mm,
is something.
it really
And I
is.
I don't know if it means that it's going to come out that anything actually happened like in a tangible way, or if it's in the sense that Han wasn't able to be there for him, and not through necessarily like a fault of his own,
Mm,
but that because he wasn't force sensitive and Ben clearly is very strong,
yeah.
that they weren't able to truly connect.
Yeah. No, that's my impression of their relationship. That just because Han could not understand the Force, and could not like get to grips with what that meant for the type of person his son was going to be or the destiny he was going to have, he can never really like understand or connect with him. You get a sense from what Leia says in the novelization that she really didn't think Han was very good at understanding Ben and didn't feel like he could like empathize with him or talk to him in the way that he needed to be spoken to, which is
Yeah.
part of why she sent him to Luke, because she hoped that Luke could do better because he was also force sensitive. And look how that went.
Yeah. Well, we also know from Bloodline that it was a secret that Leia was Vader's daughter, right? And
Yeah.
even Ben didn't know that. So if you can imagine him like feeling growing up that he can't relate to his father, he can't really connect to him in a deep, profound way, and then all of a sudden finds out that his grandfather was this dark Sith Lord, very strong in the Force, the chosen one.
Yeah.
It might draw him to that life himself, that he would feel like, oh, finally, I have this father figure.
Yeah.
Even though he's dead, but I can relate to him more than my own father.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. Like when you think about it, Kylo has like four different father figures almost, because he has Han, he has Snoke, he has Luke, because Luke, depending on how old Ben was when he was sent to him, which seems likely to have been like when he was a teen, so like still relatively young, he was had to kind of feel like a surrogate father role, and then you have Vader.
Yeah.
So it's like all these different like masculine presences, and it's no wonder he's confused because like he has like no cornerstone.
Lots of daddy issues.
Yeah, so many daddy issues. Right, is there anything else that we want to say?
I think that kind of sums up stuff in The Force Awakens. I mean, there's a lot more to say about Kylo, but we should maybe save that for a future discussion.
Yeah, no, we're encroaching upon 2 hours, so I think we should move swiftly on to questions at this point. Right, if you have any questions for the podcast, please email them through to us at scavengershoard@gmail.com. Right, and we're just going to quickly get through the questions we had waiting for us. And the first question is from Sam. Hey there, I discovered your show on YouTube recently and really enjoy listening, so couldn't resist sending you ladies an email. Thank you. So I guess my main question is on the hot topic of the potential Rey-Kylo romance thread going forward, particularly in regards to the direction conclusion, which I think is more up for grabs than the question of will they, won't they. One possibility I see is a tragic romance scenario, almost in the way of a Shakespearean tragedy type situation, especially if the romance turns out to be one-sided. I can't help but wonder though, considering the family audience, if the Disney execs, Lucasfilm writers have the balls to put down something so emotionally complex and potentially heartrending. I mean, yeah, there have been some great moving moments throughout the saga, but nothing I personally would group with the kind of situation I'm envisioning here. We've already seen what betrayal abandonment has done to Kylo Ben already, i.e. Darkseid. So what would be rejected by Rey due to this guy? If they were to take the story in that direction, of course, which returns to my initial question, would they? So, Kirsty.
This is like the big question, right?
Yes.
For Reylo shippers, anyway.
Yeah, it's a very heavy and loaded question.
Yeah. So just talking from my perspective, for the first few months after watching the film, I was convinced that Kylo's interest in Rey would remain one-sided. Because, you know, just looking at the first film, it's like, how the hell are they going to get Rey to feel something for this guy? Like, he's a mess. But then I realized that if it was going to be one-sided throughout the whole trilogy, especially if that ends up factoring into some kind of redemption for Kylo, whatever redemption ends up looking like, does that make the story too much about him?
Yeah.
Because if Rey is simply his muse, who doesn't actually go on a transformative journey herself in terms of an emotional turnaround or 180 towards a character who she currently hates, just like Luke did Vader, that seems to make it more about him.
Yeah.
So it might be that her conflicted feelings for Kylo, because you can tell already that she's kind of confused by how he's behaving around her, that might end up being a major source of her beginning to understand how the darkness and light can coexist.
Yes.
Not just within one person, but as a concept, you know, like a worldview. Because she's the only character who's been in his mind and can understand that conflict that's going on in him and that she might come to feel as well.
Yeah.
And it just comes back to this idea for me that, you know, at the beginning of Star Wars, no one would have anticipated that Luke could love Vader.
Yeah.
Like, that just wasn't on the radar.
Yeah.
And if we're going to look at it from a Jungian sense, which obviously you're supposed to do in Star Wars, like there's this concept of the shadow. For
Mm.
Rey's journey to be completed, she has to integrate with the shadow at some point.
Yeah.
And Kylo is very much her shadow, just like Vader was Luke's.
Yeah. No, you express it so well. I'm not sure what else I have to add.
Well, we could also talk about, you have to talk about the genre of Star Wars as what it is, which is
Yes.
kind of this optimistic. It has a lot of angst and drama, but in the end, it has this optimistic tone. It's for children.
Yeah. No, totally. Yeah, like I think having it the dynamic resolve on that point of view with like Ray saying, "No, go away," or something along those lines, it's not very like satisfying, like just on like a basic narrative level. Um, like doesn't tend to be how stories work, especially not these kinds of stories. Like in a tragic story, like that might happen like as a awful sad end to a love story, and then like the guy like tops himself or is like never seen again or something. But that is not Star Wars. Star Wars is all about optimism and hope and reconciliation and ultimately love. So I think if they do go down the route of like developing this relationship between Rey and Kylo, then it is probably going to have at least an optimistic ending. I don't necessarily think like white picket fence and 2.5 children and a little dog Fido.
No.
Yeah, I think that's thinking way too optimistically. But I think you could definitely see it on like a notes where there's like mutual love there and care for each other. Like even if those characters can't necessarily be together, like that might be the tragedy, for example. It could be bittersweet in that they love each other, but Kylo has to leave. Like he has to go off to atone, like Ronin style.
Yeah, that kind of paves the way for a future trilogy, right? If you keep things a bit more open-ended like that.
Yeah.
I just want to point out because I know the idea of Kylo and Rey romance we've talked about before gets a lot of flack,
Mm,
but even if these characters were related, the story would still be kind of similar. It
yeah.
would just be familial love instead of romantic.
Yes.
Because if Rey turned out to be Kylo's younger sister or younger cousin,
Mm,
it would still be about them forming this connection.
yes.
It doesn't make it any less profound. It's just a different kind of relationship.
Yeah. No, exactly. I think The Force Awakens makes it perfectly clear that this is the central relationship of this new trilogy. Like this is the new Luke and Vader. And like I say, we don't think that's familial. We think it's more likely to go in the direction of romance. But like either way, familial or non-familial, there is going to be like this core of like seeing beyond the initial like hatred and lack of understanding and resolving towards something more beautiful and like redemptive. Like
Yeah,
otherwise
because
it's not Star Wars.
yeah, the arc has to go one way or the other. So The Force Awakens gives you this massive clue because it's like these characters are enemies now.
Mm,
So they can't be by the end. Whereas if you look at the prequel trilogy, yes, it turned out to be a tragedy, but it was tragic because of the love that those characters had in the first place. Whether you're looking at Anakin and Obi-Wan or Anakin and Padme,
yes.
you have to have something that's lost.
Mm,
So if these two characters didn't grow up together and don't love each other now,
mm.
then where is it going? Because you have to have some stakes there. If they're already enemies and they just stay enemies, it's like, oh, okay, well, that was kind of pointless. Neither character went on a journey in relation to the other.
Yeah, no, exactly. If it's like they by the end of The Force Awakens, it's like, I hate you. By the end of episode 9, I hate you.
Exactly.
It's not a very dynamic character arc to put it mildly.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I definitely think there's going to be like at least a note of optimism to end on. I think it probably will be more ambiguous than Return the Jedi, because Return the Jedi is literally everyone around a campfire singing like Kumbaya, like so it's
Yeah.
also happy and perfect. And I think they are going to want to leave more room open for future stories to be told than Return the Jedi did. But yeah, it should still end on a happy note, and I think that precludes the kind of scenario you suggest. But I do think that like there's interest in story possibilities and like that sense of tragedy. But I just don't see that being the way they go the films.
Yeah, I think, as we said at the beginning, The Force Awakens is an optimistic film, but it has this tragedy at its core,
Mm,
what happens between Kylo and Han.
yeah.
you have to see some kind of resolution by the end of the story that Kylo somehow made peace with what he's done
Yeah.
or is trying to atone for what he's done. Um, and people have different ideas about redemption. I know we're going to have a future episode on this, so I don't want to keep talking about it.
Yes.
But the story has to move in some kind of direction.
Yeah. No, exactly. It has to be progress. Right. The next question is from Mark. First of all, great podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm quite new to this side of the fandom, and after listening to a lot of Rebel Force radio and making Star Wars, now this is podcasting, it's refreshing to hear a great female perspective of current topics and debates. Oh, thank you so much. That's really cool to hear. Also, I really appreciate that you address the Mary Sue issue and the sexist point of view of some people while staying politically correct and not stereotyping them as the general male Star Wars audience. To my question, how do you think Ben will redeem himself? Sacrificing himself to defeat Snoke might be a no-brainer, but what and who is going to turn him back to the light? Kirsty!
Well, as we were just talking about, I think the way that he feels after killing Han is going to be the start of Kylo's redemption.
Yes.
I don't think that necessarily means he's going to be perfect in episode 8 and everything's going to be resolved. I actually think that things might get a lot worse for him.
Yes.
At least for the first half of episode 8. But Rey might now be the only character who hasn't given up on him because she has this insight into what he's thinking and feeling that other characters they might not. So spoiler territory, just to warn people, I'm going to talk about a little spoiler here. Making a Star Wars team have hinted that she saw something else in his mind during the interrogation scene besides the Vader thing. So, and I think Jason Ward said at some point that that's going to have ramifications for the future story.
Yeah.
So we don't know what that is yet, but I think there's going to be this intimate connection between them. Like she knows things that other people don't, and we know she's going to have that Force vision that kind of goes back to what happened before the events of the film. So I do think there's likely to be this element of self-sacrifice, and I know we're going to have a segment at some point on Rian Johnson's films, but I do think this is quite a common theme for his stories. So I could see something big happening at the end of episode 8 that kind of leaves us wondering whether Kylo's going to live or die.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I definitely think they need to keep us in suspense about it. So, because if there is a redemption, then it wouldn't be until episode 9, I don't think. It's possible, it could be in episode 8, but I think it's more likely that we begin to see, more signs that they're moving in that direction in episode 8. But then those seeds actually come to fruition, in episode 9. So I can see, them developing the Kylo and Rey relationship more. And then through that, you come in to appreciate more about why Kylo became Kylo in the first place and actually see a future for him in some way, potentially with Rey, or at least you can see the hope for redemption for him because Rey sees that. And then in episode 9, we actually really see him act and take actions. Don't know which actions because who knows what happens in episode 9 at this point. That actually justify that redemption and make you feel that he is truly atoning for what he's done and that he wants to be redeemed. Because I think that's a lot of people's problem with the whole redemption question is that in Force Awakens, he is very actively trying not to be redeemed.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, right? You see a lot of people who they hate Kylo for what he's done, and I completely get it. You're supposed to at this point. This is them setting up the story. If he wasn't doing horrible things and acting like a villain, then there would be nothing to redeem him from.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah. So there are seeds of doubt. He's obviously a conflicted person, and he clearly regrets what he's done at the end.
Yes.
But he does have to take action for people to say, okay, redemption is coming. What I think episode 8 is likely to do is to set up this investment the audience has in him being redeemed. And I think part of that will be making it clear to people that Rey is not related to the Skywalkers. Because the idea that she might be, it doesn't make Kylo as important as he might end up being to the story if he's the sole Skywalker.
Yeah.
If the general audience thinks that Rey is related, there's not such a high stakes there because she's on the good side and she can continue the line.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't raise the stakes in quite the same way. But the trick would be getting people invested in the idea of Kylo being redeemed, actually rooting for it. Because at the moment, people are angry at him.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to take a lot for people to get past that whole Han Solo issue, shall we say. It's going to be Kylo's annus horribilis, or however you pronounce it. Oh, and as for the whole thing, will he kill Snoke? I think that's very likely. I'd like to see Kylo and Rey kill Snoke together, preferably while holding the same lightsaber, something badass like that.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about specific scenarios like that, but there does have to be this element of them working together because, Rey is the main character, so she has to have a huge antagonist like that to overcome, and she's already beat Kylo. He can't be an antagonist in that way for her again.
Yeah.
I'm sure in episode 8 they're going to big up the whole them coming together for round 2 of the saber fight, but
yes.
And this idea that he's probably going to beat her because he lost last time.
Yeah.
But it can't be okay, well, episode 9 the same thing's happening again,
Yeah.
So
it's not very thrilling, is it?
No, there has to be something bigger than that, and I think it must be them taking down Snoke together at some point.
Yeah. No, exactly. I think that's likely to be episode 9 material, but we will see. Right, and then the final question is from Edward. Right, and it is. I'm sure you have all gone over this, but I have to ask. Have the Rey Skywalker crowd considered that the only two possibilities that would make that a reality are very dastardly indeed? That would essentially put Luke on par with the baddies of this universe. First scenario, Luke met a woman and had Rey. At some point, for reasons unknown, the mother is removed from the equation. Luke takes Rey and abandons her on Jakku for reasons unknown, then proceeds to train Ben for 5 years. And when it all turns to shite, instead of retrieving his daughter, he disappears into the void to gallivant from temple to temple in hope of what? Does it even matter at that point? Second scenario, and this is somehow worse. Luke meets a woman, they have Rey, and at some point, for unknown reasons, the mother leaves Luke, takes Rey, abandoning her on Jakku, and then disappears. All the while, Luke carries on as if all is well, and we have a Jerry Springer family in Star Wars. I can't reconcile these things in my head. Everyone involved is an asshole, and Rey was straight dumped on. No thanks. Anyhow, can't wait for the new podcast. You guys rock. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. All these lovely emails from people.
Yeah, no, they're really nice. It's awesome. I could get used to this. I want to say there's a third scenario. One night stand.
Oh, yeah, that sounds very Disney. Not to slut shame Luke Skywalker or anything.
Yeah.
You do you, Luke. No judgment.
Yeah, you don't know Luke could be into free love.
Yeah, anyone who's read Bloodline knows that it's actually quite funny. They made a point of emphasizing that Ben Solo was conceived after Han and Leia got married.
Yes.
It seems unnecessary because it's like, okay, we already knew that they were in love and in a committed relationship. But
that is very we're out to please the conservative family organization of America.
Yes. But it's another reminder that Star Wars is kind of in that fairy tale realm, right? That you can have side characters with kind of murky origins, like Armitage Hux. We now know that he is a bastard.
We don't mean that as a slur, by the way. He's
literally a bastard. Yeah. Oh, he's a bastard in the other sense too. Come on.
Oh, come on! I don't think you're looking at Hux deeply enough. I'm sure he likes flower arranging and stuff in his free time. No,
he does have that cute cat.
Yeah, exactly. Go Millicent.
But yeah, I kind of agree with Edward here. I can't think of a scenario in which Luke is Rey's dad and somehow comes out of this looking good. Because it's not like he just left her somewhere for safekeeping. Jakku is horrible.
Yeah.
Every day she was fighting for her life. Unkar Plutt was treating her like crap. It's really horrible. She was just so alone.
Yeah.
And it's just not the same as leaving her somewhere like Naboo to take care of her.
Yeah.
Have anyone else around.
Yeah, it's like people act like it would be like Luke doing what was done to him. But Luke was left with a loving uncle and aunt who wanted a baby and raised Luke as if he were their own child. And yeah, don't get me wrong, Tatooine, boring as hell. But Luke wasn't suffering extreme poverty or having to fight to survive.
Yeah, I think it's part JJ went out of his way to show how terrible Rey's life was. It's not there by accident. I think it's actually partly to say, hey, do you really think our heroes would do this to this girl?
Yeah.
Like, because I can't think that Han, Leia, or Luke would do that to her.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I think the points Edward has raised there, the reasons why, like, I came to realize that Rey Skywalker just wasn't viable.
yeah. I know that not every Star Wars fan has read Bloodline, so they might not realize that Luke was still gallivanting around, as he puts it, with Ben
Yeah.
6 years before The Force Awakens.
Mm.
So, Rey had been on Jakku for a long time even before then.
Yes.
So it just doesn't make sense for him to be carrying on as if nothing happened. If he was her father, he'd be spending every waking moment looking for her.
Yeah. No,
Especially considering what happened to him with his parents.
Yeah. No, totally. And these people, they're all Force sensitive. They should be able to sense each other. They make a very clear point of Leia being able to sense family members across vast distances in space.
Yeah.
And like Luke is an actual trained Jedi. So if anyone like knows where their child is in the galaxy, Luke would know.
Yeah.
But
there are no foreshadowing hints in The Force Awakens that Rey is a lost child that they've been looking for. Even if Han and Leia aren't her parents, they're her aunt and uncle.
yes.
There's nothing. Like Han meets her, spends several days with her, bonds with her, and has no suspicion about who she is. Doesn't mention a thing to Leia. Leia is willing to blow up Starkiller Base with her on it. Like, actually, when Finn comes in and says, "Oh, my friend, I need to go and rescue her," she's like, "Yeah, but I need your information." Like, it's not her priority to look for Rey.
Yeah. No, exactly. They're almost kind of like callous about Rey, to be honest. Like they almost like treat her as like a bargaining chip in order to like secure Finn's cooperation.
Yeah. Well, Kylo goes into her mind, reads her thoughts, and doesn't come out with the fact that she's related to him. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing lines up. You really have to explain away an awful lot of the story for it to make any kind of sense.
Yeah. No, it takes a lot of contrivance.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we're done with questions now, and since we're running on quite long, we should probably wrap this up. I'm Rachel. You can find me on Star Wars Nonsense on Tumblr. And Kirsty?
I'm Bastila Bay on Tumblr and Scavenger's Hoard on Twitter. So people should come and say hello to us there.
Totally. Twitter's the place to be.
You have to get a bit of singing in every episode. Have you noticed that?
I do. I'm secretly a frustrated musical theatre actor.
I've had comments from people who enjoy your singing very much. So.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you, people. One day, Kirsty, we'll do a musical episode where everything is sung.
That would be quite.
So it will be like J.J. Abrams does a commentary for The Force Awakens.
I could easily see a musical version of The Force Awakens.
Yes.
It has such a fairy tale quality to it. Like Rey just bursts into song as she runs into the forest.
Yeah. Like Kylo could all sing like Nightwish songs or something.
Or Phantom of the Opera.
Yes. Past the point of no return. God. Okay, I think that's a sure sign I need to stop.
Okay.
Thank you for listening, everyone, and come back next week and review us on iTunes, please. Please, we're desperate, please. Okay, bye.
Bye.